Good evening, Mr. Childers. Can you hear us okay?
Absolutely. Hold on. Let me, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can. Can we get his volume up? It should be the blue switch on the right, blue slider on the right. All right, perfect. Give us just a few minutes, Mr. Childers. We've got a couple things to address, and then we'll get to the hearing part. So appreciate you being
No
here.
worries. I'm here. Sure. Thank you.
Everman guest, all lowercase, all one word. Yep, guest. G-U-E-S-T.
I will call the meeting of a joint meeting of the Building and Standards Commission and the Everman City Council to order. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. The time is 6:04. Everybody please rise for a moment of silence, followed by a pledge of allegiance. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is presentations. Have proclamation declaring May 16th through the 22nd, 2024 as Search and Rescue Week. Whereas in 2023, there were over 48,008 missing persons reports in Texas, with 12,827 being adults and 35,181 of those children. And whereas across the city of Everman and the state of Texas are impacted by missing persons, lost loved ones, and deceased family members due to criminal activity, mental health problems, medical issues, outdoor activities, or natural causes. And whereas search and rescue resources bring closure and aid in the reunification of families, whereas search and rescue professionals perform flood and swift water rescues and evacuations, technical rescues, locate missing children and endangered adults, and otherwise meet their community's emergent needs. Now therefore be proclaimed by the City Council of the City of Everman that we proclaim May 16th and 22nd, 2024 as Search and Rescue Week in the City of Everman. We also offer our thanks to all of the first responder agencies and search and rescue agencies, organizations that support and work tirelessly on finding those who are lost and bringing closure to the families of the missing.
Mayor, if I could add real quick, so we do have Texar here. Can you turn me down just a little bit? We do have Texar here with us. Texar is one of a couple of search and rescue groups that really helped us out on the big case here involving Noel. Way down, way down. Okay. Involving Noel, and actually many of them that are here tonight were actually a part of that search. And so their work is tremendous, their support is tremendous. We certainly wouldn't have been able to put in the amount of effort and work to work on that case without them and their teamwork. They've helped us out additionally above and beyond that on our floods and many other fronts. They help us out with National Night Out. So it's a great partnership we have with them, and so I'm very thankful that they could be here tonight and very thankful to you, Mayor, for recognizing them. So.
You guys want to come on out?
You guys want to join them? Absolutely.
Okay, so at this point, the city council meeting will be recessed, and we'll start the deliberation and determination on cases, case number 1394, continuation, deferred decision. So it's a substandard hearing. Oh, wait a minute. This board is continuing the public hearing from April 16, 2024, in case number 1394, to discuss the structures located at 924 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 928 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 917 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 929 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, and 900 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, and more commonly known as the Paradise Apartments. Because this is a continuation of the hearing from April 16th, the board will allow the city to provide updated information and evidence to support the city's belief that the Paradise Apartments are dangerous and a threat to citizens' health and safety. After that, the representatives of Paradise Apartments may provide the board updated information and evidence as well. Owners who want to repair the structure must have a detailed plan for the repairs, including an estimated cost and a schedule for completion. Finally, anyone can address the board regarding the property unless someone presents evidence that the structure is safe or that it can be repaired. The structure will or may be ordered demolished. Is that correct? No, okay. Only people recognized by me and duly sworn in may address the board. Speakers shall move to the podium when directed, state their name and address, and then present their evidence or make their argument. The board may ask questions of any speaker, including city staff, during the public hearing. Owners or their representatives may also ask questions of the board or of city staff. After the public hearing is closed, only board members will be allowed to speak. The board will have a discussion and a vote to determine if the structure is dangerous and issue an order to either secure and repair the structure or to demolish it. An order by the board is final, and any appeals must be filed in district court. It is now 6:11 p.m. And at this time, I open the public hearing for case number 1394 involving structures located at 924 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 928 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 917 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, 929 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140, and 900 Corey Road, Everman, Texas, 76140. All structures being located in Tarrant County, Texas,
At this time,
with the legal description being Tract A, Block 21, Everman Park, 6 filing, and addition to the City of Everman, Tarrant County, Texas, according to the plat, therefore recorded in volume 388-38, page 30, map records, Tarrant County, Texas. I would ask anyone who wants to speak to the board to stand and raise their right hand and be sworn in. No.
Just stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Okay.
Are you planning, is anybody in the audience planning to give any testimony?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you may be seated. Okay. Okay. So there's been a request to allow the engineer for the apartments to speak first, since he's on Zoom. His name is Tony Childress. Are you with us, Mr. Childress?
I am. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
I want to thank you for, my intention was to be there when I was told about this. I made a commitment to be there in person. I was traveling all last week. Unfortunately, I was informed when I got back, my daughter had planned a big birthday party for me at a specialty restaurant, and I couldn't cancel. And that sounds like a bad excuse, but these are rare days. So I apologize for not being there in person.
It's okay. We appreciate you being here.
So,
Yeah, sorry, back up.
That was a little more sensitive.
I'll back up a little bit. First of all, we appreciate Mayor and the city for allowing Mr. Childress to present first, so obviously you all can get your questions out from him about what's taking place over the last month since we were last before the board. I believe the city was provided a copy of Mr. Childress's report dated today, along with some backup documentation. And based on that, I will cede the floor to Mr. Childress, who I'm sure all of you are more interested to hear from than me, and let him kind of go over his report and, of course, answer any questions that the city may have of him.
Okay, so I put together a progress report of where we've gotten to as of yesterday. We had finished all the relative elevation surveys. We surveyed the ground floor. A relative elevation surveys where we take what's called a zip level, and we take data all the way across 10 feet on center around the ground floor to track movement. We did the same thing on the second floor. We did the same thing to the roof from the underside. We also did what's called a Matterport scan. A Matterport is a 3-dimensional laser, so it takes a complete photograph of the entire area, so you can actually see everything and walk through it. We've been on the roof. We've inspected the roof. We've inspected the facades of the buildings. We brought in a master electrician and a licensed electrical engineer to inspect all the exteriors of all buildings, but only the interiors of the first building, the 24 units of building 929. Where we're at right now, we're on track where we expected to be with one hiccup. We know where there's areas, probably 20% of the units we want to expose to be able to look and confirm, either sagging floor joists or cracked floor joists. But the asbestos report came back that the ceilings and the floors are hot. That means that the ceilings, the popcorn ceilings, they're okay in place, but we can't disrupt them without giving the state a 10-day notice and then hiring an abatement contractor who's certified to be able to create those openings for us. The people in the space are not at risk and they do not have to move out, but the work has to be done under a controlled environment and done to where it's certified that it's done properly. So we have given names to the owner of abatement contractors. We did hire a licensed hygienist who did the testing, a very well-known company called Ecosystems. So we can't cut through the floor to see it, and we can't cut through the ceiling to see it. We have to, again, get an abatement contractor to do that part. So we have an idea where there's isolated members that we feel are failing in the floor and about 3 conditions in the roof, but we can't open them all up until we do that next step. Our electrician did find one serious issue that is immediately being addressed. We found a power line going from a chiller over to one of the units that the corrosion in the coating and the corrosion in the pipes has gotten to a point where we felt it was an immediate need to get fixed, not wait. That my understanding is they're pulling a permit and that's being addressed as early as tomorrow. I don't know the exact dates, but that was one issue that no one had caught until we caught it. But we termed that as a life safety issue that needed immediate attention, and that's being addressed. So I was hoping by today to have really pretty color renderings for you to see exactly what we're seeing. I'm a day or two behind just because of the amount of work it is. I'll be able to give you what's called color contours, which shows you the deflections and movement in the floors, ground floor, second floor, and roof. But I still need another day or two just because it's just so much data. We found nothing on the exterior of the building. The bricks and the brick cracks are all from foundation movement. Most of the foundation was found to be within what's called the American Society of Civil Engineers Texas Association guideline for slabs on ground. So I'm not at this point seeing any structural repair needed to the foundations, but we have seen long-term seasonal movement because of these active clay soils. That's caused a lot of cracking in the brick. I did write a better summary of all of our findings to date. We've been able to track so far about 6 locations that we think definitely need to be opened up. I don't deem those as life safety. Those are issues where it looks like it's a single or another floor joist that's buckled. It'll be required, the process would be to open up the ceiling with the abater, see if it's cracked. If it's cracked, then we would shore it immediately. And then the repair, the drawing I can have to you this week, is basically reinforcing the existing floor joist with 2 new floor joists. We screw it and glue it. Now, when I say we don't do any work. We're just engineers, but we do the design that they screw it. You don't want to nail old wood. Old wood gets brittle. You always want to do a pilot hole and then put a screw in it and you glue it. So it'd be a screwed and glued application to reinforce it back to a level-like condition. We are waiting on the electrician's full report. We know there was only one serious issue that had to be done immediately. I do not have his full report of his recommendations of repairs. I'm hoping to have that this week. Kartik, I don't have my report on me. It's in my bag, in my back. If I've missed something, I'll be glad to go over it. But that's, again, we're about a week away of being able to be, well, no, we're a week away from being able to have all the data, but I can't touch an opening in that building because of state mandate of a 10-day notice.
Hey, Tony, this is Perrin. I've got a couple of questions that may help, that are from the report as well. Overall, one of the key questions, and I believe it was at the beginning of the hearing as well, is the building and the property dangerous and a threat to citizens' health and safety based on your evaluations and report and everything that you've investigated?
Well, we have that one issue that we said was a life safety issue that needed immediate attention on the electrical.
Okay,
My
so
job
let
as a
me
licensed
focus on that
structural
one
engineer,
first.
if I see anything that I feel like the building's going to collapse, someone could die, I have no choice but to report it like I already did. Everything else we see is structural distress that needs attention. It's something that needs to be addressed. There's nothing there that's going to make the building collapse. There's nothing there that someone's going to fall through the floor. There are soft spots and sagging that's got to be addressed. Being unaddressed forever, it will become a problem. But we're at a point now where it's time to fix it. But no, I don't see anything where I'm calling immediate life safety, move people out. I'm saying it's time to document it properly and fix it.
Okay, and so the electrical issue, I'm going to set that aside because that is a life safety issue and it needs to be addressed in there. And we've talked about the ways that that will be addressed in the next couple of days.
Well, wait, let me clarify something. It's a life safety issue because under certain conditions, if there's enough rain and somebody goes through the fence and goes where they don't belong, they can be hurt. This isn't a life safety issue that someone's going to be walking along a pathway and get hurt. It's a life safety issue because certain conditions could occur which you wouldn't want to occur that could cause a problem. We still called it a life safety issue, get it fixed immediately.
Right, I understand. And were there any other buildings where the electrician observed this condition, and did the electrician check the other buildings to make sure that there weren't similar conditions on those buildings externally?
Correct. When we found the first one, and again, it goes from the chiller to the unit, and we saw that, he would go and looked at every single building to make sure if this was a systemic problem or just a one-off. And this was the only one we found at that location, that area. And it was reported in the attached PDFs that I submitted last week.
And I'm going to set that issue aside. We'll talk about that. I know that you're time sensitive. Other than that electrical issue, do you have an opinion, because this was the thing that was first mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, is the building dangerous and is the property dangerous and a threat to citizens' health and safety, setting that one particular issue of the electrical aside?
No, not as it sits right now. Again, there are things that have to be fixed. This is not stuff that you can choose whether you want to fix it or not. My job is to identify those areas, prove it, give you the repair, and watch them get fixed. The only reason we don't have the ceilings opened right now is because we can't touch it. It's not my opinion, it's not my choice, it's not the city's choice, the state mandate. And if I touched it without doing it properly, I could get my license in trouble. So I'm not wanting that answer. I wish we could just go up there and cut it open and get this done. But the good news is the 10-day notice, it's called O&M notice. Once we get that notice, when we go to another building, we don't have to give another notice. These are for 12-inch by 12-inch isolated abatement for us to get access. We can do that over the next several buildings. We don't have to wait 10 days every time we want to look at another area. It's a one-time notice for the whole complex, but only the 12 by 12 openings. Once we do a repair design, and let's say I got to take out the ceiling of a large area, that's a second notice, which will be the contractor's license numbers, our drawings. That's a totally different notice. But this notice is a one-time notice for the whole complex.
And so timeline-wise, we give that notice. 10 days later, those exploratory holes can be remediated or opened by the asbestos contractor. And then at that point, you'll be able to go in with your team and do the scoping and to see the joists that need to be repaired. Our presumption at this point is that there are several of those that need to be repaired. You believe that even though you haven't yet seen them?
I've seen the data, and the data tells me I've got what I can see from the data about 6 locations. There may be more. And the reason why I say that, it's just not as easy as it sounds, because if the foundation moves, your second floor is going to move. That should make some sense. But then when your floor deflection moves, you get more movement. So you have to adjust all your numbers all the way up to find your relative differential movement per floor. And I was able to look through the data and confirm we already know of 2 or 3 that we saw visually, but we found 2 or 3 in the roof where there were some soft spots and we could see a deflection more than you would expect in a floor joist. But I think I counted 6. Now, we will have that data finished. There may be 7 or 5, but they're going to be in that range. And the intent is to cut those open. But we're also going to go to areas that don't have as much movement and cut those just to confirm that where the deflection is small and typical, it's not cracked. And where the deflection is big, it is cracked. But it proves that what we're looking at, that we're not blindly ignoring just the normal condition. So we'll open up more than just those, but we're not opening up every single ceiling joist or every single floor joist.
Gotcha. So there'll be a number of holes cut, some of them in places we think do not have joist damage, some of them in places where we think there may be joist damage, and then be able to compare the two. And then at that point, you would develop a repair plan for the particular joist that needed to have repairs done, as you mentioned earlier on in your testimony.
Yes, the only difference is the fire damage units, we can address that repair, but you have to address the whole repair. That's going to take more than just the joist. That's got other, smoke damage, other things that's got to be addressed. That's not in my scope. I'm there to address the structural damage from the broken floor joists. But at some point, we or somebody else will have to create how to fix the fire damage unit.
I understand. And so then at that point, there will be an additional asbestos notice that needs to go out. Let's assume, for example, there's 3 units where you do the investigation or scope. I'm just saying 3 units at this point. It could be more, it could be less, and then they will have to do additional asbestos remediation by taking down the ceiling there, give another 10-day notice, and then at that point...
No. Let me do it again. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This first notice is called an O&M notice. And this notice is for doing isolated openings, usually 12-inch by 12-inch, or these are giving them a state of notice that we're not doing major renovation. We're cutting very small holes. And, that gives the state the 10 days notice. And then the next 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, you can cut as many 12 by 12 openings you want. But when it comes time to fixing a floor joist, you can't fix it to a 12 by 12, a 12-inch by 12-inch opening. We'll have to take out larger sections of ceiling. That will require the repair drawings. That'll require another 10-day notice, but that's for the repair,
Right.
not for making more 12-inch by 12-inch openings.
And that's what I wanted to confirm. So the repairs will require an additional notice. They'll have to be an asbestos remediation, and then they'll be able to come out and do the marrying of the joists that you have mentioned.
Right, the abatement contractor would remove the ceiling and clean the whole area. And then a framing contractor would come in, they would jack up the floor joist, get it to a level-like condition, add the reinforcement, the glue and the screws, and whatever else we find. If you find, if it's termite damaged, again, it's going to be a reinforcing method. But yeah, I can't tell you what the full repair is going to be, but that's the concept.
And I just want to touch on something that we had talked about in the last hearing, which is the facade, the brick facade. Is there any, the inspection was done, is there any life safety issue or dangerous condition from the brick facade as you're aware at this point?
No, the ASCE requires that if the foundation or the walls experience more than 2% tilt, then the brick leans enough to get what's called out of its 1/3 centroid, and then you have to do something to, reinforce the brick. We are not at 2%. We're at just under 1%. So at this point, no, there's nothing, there's brick cracks because the foundation moved, but they're not having enough tilt or rotation that the brick is in danger of getting outside its centroid, its center point and falling.
Other than the conduit that we had mentioned, is there anything that requires a code upgrade or life safety that needs to be addressed?
Well, there's one thing that we couldn't do yet, and I'm going to be bad at names, but one of the city experts is concerned, rightfully so, that there is a light junction box or electrical junction box in the kitchen over the pantry that you wouldn't see until they tore the ceiling out of the pantry, and it did not have a cover plate on it. So we agreed that we would have our master electrician and licensed engineer cut holes to see if other units had the cover plate. Again, we cannot cut those holes to inspect it until we get our asbestos abatement. So there's still more that we have to look at, but that would be a code issue. And it's not a current code issue. It was required when it was done. We just don't know if that was a one-off. So again, I've got my guns 90% loaded, but I'm not 100% finished yet.
Okay. And what I'd like to do is, I may have some other questions for you later. I do know you have to be going by 7. What I'd like to do is turn it over to the city manager and the council in case they have questions for you, to make sure that we can get all of those in before you have to.
Well, to be clear, I've told my family how important this is. My dinner's at 7, but if I have to sit in my car and keep talking, I'm here. I'm committed to finishing this, whatever I need to do.
I appreciate that.
We're hopeful we can get to our dinner too, so.
Yes.
Well, I will bet you my dinner's gonna be better than yours. I'm going to Torelli's, which is
I
a
have
hard
no
place
doubt,
to
sir.
get into in Dallas.
What I'd like to do is turn it over to them and then come back if there's anything else that we still need to address.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Childress, I do have just a couple questions for you before the council asks theirs. One, so I just need some clarification. One comment you made was that you inspected the electrical of the other facilities and did not note any substandard issues. The report that was submitted to us in the initial presentation included all kinds of items on many buildings, included electrical panel unsecured, wiring exposed. So are you stating that upon your inspection, all of those issues have been remediated since? And there were no
No, sir.
others?
So let me clarify. We only had time to do the inside and outside of building 929, what's listed on that report. When we found that circuit issue at the chiller, we went to go look at all other chiller connections for all buildings. We have not gone into any other units besides 929.
Okay.
So we have to take this one bite at a time, and we agreed, I thought, that we would take 24 units, because, to do every single building, it would just take a long time. We had to grab one building and attack it. So we have done a full inspection, elevation survey, electrical of building 929. We have not done a full inspection of all other units, all other buildings. Now, we did look at the panels. The owner had somebody in the last couple of weeks secure the panels with secure fasteners and closed up those panels. So a lot of that list was addressed by the owner, not by us.
Sure. No, and I think my question was, had that work been inspected? I just didn't know if that had been inspected yet or not. So, okay.
No, not yet. We're focusing on 929. And to be clear, when we found an issue, we had the responsibility to say, and it wasn't in my scope. It wasn't in my scope to go look at all those other ones. But once we found it, we had an obligation to go look at the other chiller units to see if that same condition occurred anywhere else. And that condition doesn't occur anywhere else. We did not look at any other electrical items in any of the other buildings as of yet. Just 929.
Okay, my next question is, and forgive me, nobody at this table other than a city engineer is an engineer. I'm certainly not an engineer, and I'll never claim to be, but I need you to kind of break it down a little bit more for me as it relates to the foundation. I'm not understanding if there is a requirement to do a bore to inspect the structural members for damage. How do we know, and how can we deem that to not be a dangerous structure currently?
So we walk up there, we do an elevation survey, and the elevation survey will show us where you start getting deformation in the floor. If you feel, and the whole floor is sagged, if the whole floor is sagged, then you've got a major issue. That means that you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 floor joists that are broken, and that would become a potential life safety issue. So our elevation surveys are done to detect where the movement is, and we find an isolated location where there'd be what we expect to be a damaged floor joist. Floor joists are what they call repetitive members. You have a whole bunch of them that holds up the floor. Your decking spans over many floor joists. So what that means is the floor will continue to hold up people, but it's not going to continue to stay flat. So we found, again, the floors are going to deflect, but they're only going to deflect a certain amount as far as what they're going to deflect. So that's why we would go to an area. We would, I'm not saying we jump on it, but we literally feel how rigid it is. We take the elevation data, we go to the bottom and we look. And again, it has to do with, I hate to say it, our experience of investigating old structures. So I would be awfully shocked that we could have such a small isolated deflection and have many floor joists broken. I expect that we're going to find, 5 to 6 areas and 10 to 12 floor joists globally, and that's not good. but they'll have to be fixed. So I'm using the elevation data, the Matterport scan, our physically being on site, making that's how we came up with that determination.
Okay. And then as we're looking at this report, again, not being engineers, not regularly reviewing these reports, as we're looking at these relative elevation reports, can you explain to the board the numbers that are indicated on this report? So near the center of the structure obviously is the 0. These numbers, one way or the other, as they surround, are going up and down, 0.4, 0.2. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so those numbers are raw data. What that means is we go into a unit, we pick a spot, and we pick a similar spot. This spot isn't a 0. It's just a spot that we say we're going to call this 0. So if we say it's 0 in the middle, and you go to one side and it's a minus number, that means it's dropped. That means the foundation has experienced, it doesn't mean it's dropped. It means it's down. And if there's, on the other side, if it's a positive number, that means it's up. Now, what you have to determine is, did one side heave up because of swelling soils? Did one side, settle over time? Or is there both? So it doesn't tell you necessarily what caused it to go up or down. It just tells you how much out of level it is. Now, there are publications, and I'm one of them who published one of those publications. But the publication that I published is for newer structures. So the one that's Texas has recognized is the American Society of Civil Engineers. Texas Association has published guidelines for evaluation of slabs on ground. And it tells you how much you're allowed to tilt, which is, leaning, and how much you're allowed to bend. And as long as you're within a certain range, you should consider to be fine. And it's more complicated than that. It's not that simple, but there's a whole analysis to go through. So the foundation is not a structural concern, but we got to make sure it hasn't moved too much. But I have to know how much the foundation moved. When you go to the second floor, you may go to the second floor and see I'm 0, but then I go down to 3 inches and you think, wow, that floor has moved 3 inches. Well, it hasn't. If the foundation's gone down 2.5 inches, then that wall's got to go down 2.5 inches. And you have your local elections. So when you do that, you can see, okay, if the slab was flat in the first place, I still have a 1/2 inch deflection in my floor framing. And is that acceptable? And it is. But you'll also find areas where there's 2 inches of deflection once you normalize the numbers. So I have to know the foundation movement and correlate that to the second floor, make it balance out so I can get the actual deflection in the framing. I can do it all over again, but does that make any better sense?
Yes, no, that does. That's helpful to understand these reports.
Interesting. If you want to look at the data, if it's kind of easy to do once you learn it, if in one corner you have a -1 inch dimension and the other corner you've got a 0 dimension, the middle, if it was perfectly flat, would be the average of the two numbers. So it'd be like a -0.5. So if you average those two numbers, once you normalize it and you take out the middle number and it's 2 inches, that means you have 1.5 inches more deflection than we're expecting. And that's how we identify areas that we say this needs further investigation.
Okay. Those are questions I have. Do you have some follow-ups?
Mr. Childress, this is Chief Watley. I've got 2 questions for you. One,
Yeah, Chief.
you just stated that if you were to do bore samples and expose floor joists, and if you were to notice 5, 6, 7 different damaged floor joists, then that would become a serious issue, an area for concern that we would cross the threshold into a safety issue, correct? That's what you just stated?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So what we said was the process is we cut it open. If we see it cracked, we'll immediately put a pipe race and we'll support it. So if we find something that's broken, this isn't something you'll get a permit on. You don't have to. You take a 2x4 T and you put it underneath there to emergency brace it. Now, if it's just one of them, I won't do it. But if there's 2 or 3 or 4 in a row, that's what I would do because it's too long of a span. It's too big of an area, and you can't rely on the repetitive members to carry the load.
Right. So I want to focus on the numbers that you stated, 5, 6, or 7 continuous. We don't have your data in front of us. We were told that within 30 days we would have at least the first set of data, and we don't have anything other than hypothesis and written statements.
Well, you
So
should
we don't
have
have
the data.
anything.
The data was provided. You should have the floor
I'm
plans,
saying like the
all the
actual,
data, all the relative elevation surveys.
similar to what AJ Engineering provided for. So I'm going off of what the only actual floor plan and a mock-up of the floor joists that were damaged within 929 building, the 6 apartments that were exposed so that we could see all the floor joists. And this is a professional engineering firm that provided this, that was contracted by the apartments. And based upon what I'm seeing here, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and possibly more floor joists where it clearly is marked that the floor damage is damaged or cracked all the way through. So based on that, I would say that clearly crosses that 5, 6, 7 threshold into a life safety issue, wouldn't you?
All right, so you're saying that you've got 4, 5, 6 in a row, side by side by side? That was been noted by another firm?
This is what was provided this was the report that was done by AJ Engineering previous to the determination that we wanted to make it a substandard, proceed with substandard designation, that the property owner, they contracted for this service, and this is the report that we were provided by them. And this
Well,
is
I
also
don't know.
provided by the
I don't
attorneys.
know if I have that full report. I've not seen any indication or proof that there's 4 or 5 side by side that have all failed. I know we've seen and we've documented as we did in our first report. But again, I thought you were talking about my report, Chief. So I
No,
apologize.
this is the last report that we received from the property owner's contracted engineer that did specifically the 929 building with the 6 apartments that were affected within the initial incident. So there's
Well,
many
I understand.
there.
And again, I didn't have anything to do with the AJ report.
I understand,
What's
but
exposed
your
is easily
testimony is
visible.
saying that what they're saying is not factual. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying is that you can go into those buildings that are exposed and you can go in and count them. You can see them. That's easy. We've already accommodated for those. We know those. What we don't know, which is in the other full 24 units that weren't exposed. And by the way, as my report says, we were only able to get into 22 of the units. It took us many days because we had to work around tenant schedules to get in. And 2 of the tenants still won't let us in the unit. I'm sorry. We still have not been able to work out with 2 of the tenants to get in. So I've only looked at 22 of the 24 units, and it's clearly noted on my floor plans.
I understand.
But I am not
But
aware
so based upon
of the
what your
other guys' work.
definition was, you would determine based on the data that I've got in front of me with an engineering report, if this were your report, you would deem that as an unsafe structure and dangerous to the public, based on what you
Yes,
stated as a
if I
threshold.
found 4 or 5 floor members all side by side, so not spaced out, I would immediately request it to be shored up.
Okay.
Again, just like the electrical, we would not put it out for bid. We would say, okay, go get the stuff and shore it up.
All right. And then my other follow-up question is, you stated that, and within my previous testimony, like the city manager stated, I'm not an engineer, and I understand that a brick facade is not considered a critical structural member to a building, but it is thousands of pounds of movable, damageable, destructive force if it does fall. And what we discussed in the initial
Absolutely.
meeting was that we cannot, y'all cannot, and this is what you offered, was that you cannot effectively judge if it was secured or not without looking at the deterioration or lack thereof brick ties. So you have made the statement tonight that you can officially determine that based purely on any deflection that the brick facade is not a dangerous portion of the building, yet we still cannot determine, is the brick facade even attached to the subwall? How can we determine that it's not at risk of collapse if we don't know where or how much is attached to the inner wall? without
Sure.
having
So,
bore.
Chief,
And I
I'll give you-
understand we haven't had that
I got
opportunity,
it.
but I'm
Yeah,
calling
I'll
into
give
question
it
your
to
statement of you're determining it's not safe without even seeing it.
Okay, so Chief, it's pretty simple. The first one is, as a structural engineer, I am required to follow certain statutes and rules, and those rules are that whether there's brick ties or no brick ties, and I'll send you the publication, that if the brick doesn't exceed 2% tilt, then you don't have to remediate it. Now, number two is, if I open up and I see from a fire or I see rotted brick ties, then my job would be to recommend, because of wind, to secure additional brick ties. It's not my job, unless I need to be hired to do it, to go tear open holes in walls to go look at brick ties to see if they're okay. If I know they're not okay, I have an obligation to fix it. So my answer wasn't whether the brick ties are good, the brick ties are in stable condition, the brick ties haven't rusted. I don't know anything about the condition of those brick ties. There's been nothing shown that said the brick ties have rotted. My concern was the cracking of the brick and the movement of the foundation. And as I said before, there are clearly stated rules that says if the brick doesn't exceed 2% tilt, it is not considered to be eccentric and it won't fall. That doesn't mean a windstorm can't make it fall, but that's a total different scope. That means I got to go either take brick out and go inspect brick ties or tear out walls to go inspect brick ties. My scope was never to, and I'm sorry if I confuse people, my job is not to go look at brick ties. It's to see if the brick is exceeding what's allowed from a rotation and has any indication of an imminent need of it failing. I have no idea what the condition of those brick ties are. And my scope was never to go and expose brick to look at the condition of the brick ties. It was purely just, what does the code say the brick is allowed to lean?
Well, maybe that was
Does that
my
make any
misinterpretation,
sense?
but I was under the impression, based on our the complaint of us stating that the condition of the brick facade did appear to be deteriorating and becoming a safety issue, that you, in the last hearing, stated during your borehole inspection, a part of that borehole inspection would be to inspect those brick ties. That was what I was under the impression of, but maybe that was just
No, if I did it, I could still do that, Chief. So I'm not playing any games here. I did not have that in my scope, but I can. I think we don't want to go through the walls because the walls most likely will also have asbestos. It'd be better to take out brick because from the brick you can see it much easier. For me to go through the walls, I'm going to have to go through the walls. And so for us, we can take out, we can have someone take out isolated brick to see, what the spacing of the brick ties are, what the condition of the brick ties are. I was purely discussing that we would look at the cracking, we would map it. We would also look, and my concern was foundation movement. And that, if the foundation moves to a certain point, there are guidelines that says I have to address it. So, and I wish I was another week or two further along, but again, I have no qualms looking at brick ties at all. I just didn't have, for whatever reason, brick ties as being part of the concern. I thought it was the rotation and tilt of the brick.
Just a couple quick questions. I know on the sorry, Andrew Luce, city engineer. A couple of questions. For the boroscope, I know that y'all have mentioned that it is 10-day notification. What is the actual time frame for completing that work?
No, I'll get myself in trouble here. You should be able to do all this in one day. But again, I should have been able to get these elevation surveys done in 2 days, but you can't control homeowners or rental people if we can't get into the unit because it's a bad time for them. So it can be done in 1 day to 2 days at the most if I can get access to all the units. And again, we're dealing with real people who have lives and jobs and kids, so it's not their fault, but we can't always just get into their unit.
Okay. And then, so based on what you've seen, are there any concerns with the flooring handling the required loads based on what you've seen?
It's a complicated question. Is it a life safety issue? No. Is it going to handle the loads that's required and the deflection that's required? No, it's over deflecting. So we got to fix it. So I don't want to give you the wrong answer. As a structural engineer, I got to make sure people aren't going to fall through it and the building's not going to collapse. And I'm absolutely convinced that's not going to happen. But it's over deflecting, which doesn't meet the requirement of flatness for a floor. So one is it performing the way you want to? No, not at all. But is it a life safety issue? No. But if you don't fix it, it's going to continue to get worse. It can become a life safety issue.
Okay, and then what would say you do find joists that need to be replaced? What is the timeline for those repairs?
So the first thing we'll do is we'll put a temporary brace underneath it. So typically you do it with either what's called a pipe jack, but I typically like using wood better. So you brace it up to make sure that it is no longer going to get worse, because we cannot open that ceiling until we get the drawings have to be completed. They've got to be sent to the state with a 10-day notice with a licensed contractor signed on. So I can have the drawings ready before they open anything because it's the same fix. But you're going to have to go ahead and pull the permit, and you're going to have to go ahead and put the 10-day notice in to do the repairs. So I would guess from if we said go tomorrow, you're probably looking at 30 days from beginning to end.
Okay.
You know, 10-day notice, you got to sit around for 10 days, open up the ceilings, you got to reinforce them, remeasure and make sure they're level. You got to put the ceilings back, but you know, it's not a lot of work, but it still takes time.
Okay. And so what would the impact be for a tenant for that? Would they be able to live there, or would they have to move out for that period?
No, they would be, again, I'm doing this right now in another apartment complex. You know, they can live there. It is a disruption because they can't use certain rooms because they'll be plastic. You know, so you take plastic, you plastic off the area that's being worked on. You know, if it's in their bedroom, then unfortunately they got to move out of that bedroom. So the state, we checked with the state to see if the tenants had to move out. They clearly came back and said no, but we got to protect the space. So there's an inconvenience to the tenants. That'll be something that the landlord and the tenants have to work out. But no, they do not have to move out, but they cannot occupy the room that we're working in.
Okay. And then finally, what is the timeline for the inspections and testing of the other buildings?
You know, you probably need to ask the lawyers, and I mean, I could start it immediately. It has. We were hoping to get the first building done and use it as a litmus test to know what we're seeing and what we got to look at. The whole hope, and Chief Watley, our hope was it would all be done by now. I would have had those holes opened if the asbestos didn't come back as hot. But we also took longer to get in because of, as I said, trying to get into all 24 units. So the idea is to prove this process and then be able to set a precedent and then go hit, you know, the next 2 or 3 buildings in a row. And that way, as they're fixing one building, second building done, they go to the next building. So that way you don't have crews coming and going. They're just going from building to building to building. So our attempt will be to take it one building at a time and stay ahead of the crews, because I guarantee you it's going to be similar, worse, or better than the first one. I would imagine it'd be pretty consistent across the majority of the buildings.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that was actually that is the reason why we're here. What we determined, what we found in the fire departments. You're stating exactly what we felt. If we had this level of damage and destruction to structural members within those 6 apartments, I would assume that it would be consistent throughout the rest. So I appreciate you noting that. This is Chief Watley again. I've got one last follow-up, secondary to the engineer's questioning. In the previous hearing, you stated, you had a statement with an analogy of the second floor would, you would be weary if somebody had a piano up there, because obviously it wouldn't want to carry that dead load, and there's a possibility of a leg of the piano falling through the floor. But you wouldn't you wouldn't make the determination that a person walking across the floor would have any fear of flooring collapse, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
You got a piano that its leg is going to have about a 1-inch diameter, and the punching shear of a piece of decking will not handle that load if the floor joist is cracked. But the plywood has plenty of capacity to take a 200, 300 pound mound standing on it. And that's not just an opinion, that's proven. So that's why we sit there and say a piano, the leg would puncture through. But again, I'm not trying to defend the apartment people. I'm just telling you, as a structural engineer, what it really is.
No, I understand. So, I know that I'm not calling into any bias. I'm simply stating, I'm using your example in comparison to any examples I've had. I know I've seen examples of their leases. I don't see anything in the apartment lease that excludes them from having a upright piano upstairs, or a large side-by-side refrigerator upstairs in their apartment, or something else that very well could meet the exact same weight ratio of something that you described, that would therefore give flooring compromise. So I just pose this question to you. If you're using that as an example, and you feel that weight would be a factor that could therefore give some flooring compromise, may not be a full structural collapse, I'm saying flooring compromise, but from an engineering standpoint versus a public safety standpoint, I wholly disagree that if you have any kind of puncture because of the weight of the object on the second floor is the reason why that floor is now punctured and or partially collapsed within that small area. To me, that's a safety issue. But utilizing your wording, would you not believe that there are other items that a residence on the second floor would have that would match the same weight as what you described, therefore potentially creating the same situation?
Well, again, let me try to be more clear. The code requires, so I can only go what the code requires. Anybody could put an elephant in a room and make it collapse, and it's not designed to carry an elephant. It's designed to carry a piano as long as it doesn't exceed 40 pounds per square foot. But a concentrated load by code is not supposed to exceed more than, I got to go look at the code, I can pull it up, a certain load. Anything above that can cause a problem. The problems with pianos, the reason why you put on the second floor a spreader dish is because you got to spread that load out, because a piano leg is so much load on the point of a leg, it'll puncture the plywood. I'm making a comment that if you have a failed floor joist, it's going to make heavy objects create more deflection, and the worst case scenario, you could puncture through the plywood. That is a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem. My job is to make sure a human being doesn't fall through the ceiling. And I don't see a condition right now. I'm not saying I won't find one, but I've not found a condition right now that a human being could. Now, could they go grab 2 refrigerators and put in the middle of a room? Oh boy, I could assume that might do it, but I don't know. What's the way to? I'm being honest with you. Yeah, if you put 2 refrigerators right in the middle of the room, maybe it could. You know, I never thought of that, but maybe it could. I don't know.
We have individuals that we would consider hoarders, and so the load that they have up there is probably far beyond what it should be. But that's a point for a different. I'm simply stating
Chief,
that I'm simply bringing into question that
things,
your example would make me have an issue that, to me, that would cause a fear for public safety. That's simply what I'm stating.
And Chief, you've got an incredible responsibility on your shoulders, and I really get it. You know, I have a different responsibility, but I'm limited. If the code says you can only put 40 pounds per square foot, and somebody puts 60 pounds per square foot and overloads it, I'm like, look, you can't put that much load on it, but people will still do it. But I'm limited to what the code says you're only supposed to do. So I get it. I'm worried about people's life, but I've seen people do stupid things in their attics and fall through because they overloaded their attics. I can't call it a life safety issue if they overload it. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Chief. That's not my point. There are conditions that could be created by a homeowner doing something stupid and putting load above and beyond code that could cause a failure. I completely agree with that. and you may have hoarders, and it may become more dangerous. I'm just following the code. But I'm not no, disregarding your comments.
I do have something real quick. So, and this may be more of a question for attorneys on both sides here. First off, without going back and reviewing the record, I think I was under the assumption, I've gotten past a couple of questions here during this, that we were under the assumption when we did the deferment that we were anticipating relative, thank you. We're expecting those reports related to all buildings, not just one, because we are hosting a hearing on all 5 buildings, not just one. So I feel like haven't got the information that we've needed to necessarily move this in a different direction than what we've been going. And so I just wanted to confer, I guess, with the attorneys first. Was that to your recollection as well, that we were anticipating RES reports on all buildings, not just one?
No, I thought, and Mr. Childress mentioned this last time, and we did as well, that this is going to be sort of a tranche of the surveys for 30 or 25 units at a time, simply because there's 120 units, and as Mr. Childress described the process of entering these units and getting these elevation surveys and the data back, it's a 5X of what was performed over the last month with Mr. Childress' staff on site. My impression and my recollection was that we discussed doing this in a phased way and taking this first set of 30 units or 25 units, understanding the data, and then moving to the sort of next set, which would be another 25 or 30 units and so on and so forth to complete the inspection throughout the property.
Okay.
My recollection was that's when we had the debate of this was not about one individual apartment. This was a life safety issue within all of them, and we can't segment and we can't phase in. We had to approach it as a total event.
So one of my concerns is, and I don't think anybody wants to go down this rabbit hole, but I think we can all agree that there are a breadth of issues here that have to be addressed, and pinpointing every single little piano leg that goes through a floor, all these small issues, we'll be here for days and days and days pinpointing when that's really not the purpose of the hearing, and that's not the purpose of the board, and correct me if I'm wrong on stating any of this, but our first step is to determine whether or not this is a substandard or dangerous structure. And I feel that, and Mr. Childress, you can chime in on this, but I feel like the report that has come back has revealed more issues than what was initially believed. It did identify that there are some issues that require a furtherance of investigation and repairs. More information has been provided, but it hasn't been information that has really clearly stated that it's not in any better condition than what was believed by the inspectors. Am I wrong in stating that?
Seeing certain floor joists either turn or it's cracked. Finding exactly what we said the first time. If you look at the data, and again, it's hard to interpolate, we're only seeing it in certain units. You can go 4 or 5 units in a row and see none, but yet you'll find, so I think out of the 24 units, I think I counted, less than 25% of the units had, so I'm finding exactly what we saw in the first visual inspection, that we're having this condition from age and termites, and it's our job to determine where those are at and fix them. But it's not worse than we thought. It's exactly what we thought the first time. You got some issues there. It was evident from the fire, and we're seeing that, as expected, you're going to have more of those in other units.
Okay. I think I want to be careful. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste the board's time by going into every single little wiring issue, every single little thing. I think if we need to stay focused, I think, on the conglomerate of issues. That's my belief. I think that's where we need to stay focused on to determine whether or not this is a substandard and dangerous structure. I think that's step one. Step two would be to determine whether or not to allow or not allow repairs. I think before we even get to that point, let's stay focused on the overall conglomerate of issues. Obviously, foundation being one. I just don't want to start going into all the weeds because we will be here forever going into all of the weeds. I think we're all on the same page. We all share the same goal of we need these issues to be resolved. And it's just a matter of how we determine we get to that conclusion. So, Mayor, I'd recommend if any of the board has any questions for Mr. Childress, and they can follow up with him and move on from there. I know he's cramped for time.
Okay, does any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Childress?
I'm sorry, Miss Allen. Can we get your mic so he can hear you? Thank you.
Did you or will you inspect each apartment in all 5 buildings for foundation, termites, electrical, or asbestos, etc.?
Absolutely. My intent was to do one building at a time, get the first building done to know what the full extent of issues to address are, and then create a pattern to where while they're addressing one building, I don't have to give a 10 days notice again to cut more holes in the next building. That O&M notice applies to all buildings. So we would go from one building to the next building and just keep going.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on one thing. I believe that there was some questions from Chief Watley about the issue of the number of joists in the fire unit that were together and the safety issues on that. And I think there was some confusion. Tony, you weren't doing any of when you were talking about, you observed that there might be a few spots in building 929. I think you said at the beginning that you were excluding the fire damaged units from all of the evaluation of what needed to be done. Is that correct?
Correct, because you already knew what that was. We were talking about the units that you couldn't see.
Right, and so there will be other scopes of repairs that has to be done to those fire units. But based on your relative elevation surveys that you did here, you didn't observe in your walking through and the deflection and the things that you saw that this would be a situation where you would expect to see 6 or 7 joists in a row that would have issues in that building 929.
Correct.
I think that's the main thing in terms of questions for Tony. We did have some stuff to respond to some of the questions that you guys had, but I wanted to make sure that we were respectful of Tony's time before doing that.
I have a question. Has any of the electrical work been done on building 29?
On building 929?
Yes,
Yes.
I do know that we performed an inspection within days of when this thing first came up, and the owner hired an electrician to cover up the panels that were exposed. They started doing some of the work. So that's why when our electrician came up, we did note that some of that work's been done. The life safety issue, or the one critical item that we identified just this last week, I know that, I don't say I know, I understand a permit has been pulled or is being pulled. They're starting that tomorrow. I need to let the owner and the lawyers go over that.
So
Just
I
to add
can,
to that, very briefly, there was electrical work actually done prior to the last time we were here, based on the PowerPoint and the photos of the boxes that needed cover, so on and so forth. That was done. The large scale kind of big issue from the electrical standpoint does require pulling a permit from the city, and there should be a permit pulled tomorrow to complete that portion of the work. And we are waiting Tony's electrician's report to understand if there's anything else that may need to be addressed.
And so that the council has a better understanding of exactly what we're talking about, we did provide the field observation report in your packet. It's the one that's 2024-507, and it's got some arrows pointing to like a wire. That's the issue that we're talking about that will be addressed imminently in the next day. I believe it's going to be getting pulled tomorrow. And then my understanding is that this work will be done within just a couple of days. This should all be resolved in terms of that electrical front by next week. It'll be all fixed. And they did check the other buildings for the same thing. The electrician has not gone in and done an internal inspection of the other buildings. He was going to do that building to building. There's one other electrical issue that we had presented as a possibility. We're not certain yet. That is what Tony was mentioning in the kitchen. There is a ceiling, it's closed. The question is there a junction box? If you were to open up that ceiling and look internally, is the junction box open or closed? The electrician was supposed to look at those. He couldn't do that because when we discovered asbestos, we can't cut those holes. That's going to be done. If it is determined that that needs to be covered, it is a very simple process. It would just be capping it off. And so that inspection is going to be done of a sampling of the units. The thing that we had talked about was we'll do it in a couple of units. If it's determined that it's open, then we would presume that that same thing would be present in all of the units, and so they would go back and do it for all 24 units.
Any other questions?
Not a question, just so, she still had the motion from the last meeting, so that was helpful. So the motion read, just so we're on the same page, I move that good cause exists to defer determination in this case for 30 days to allow the owner to complete an elevation survey, an electrical study, and prepare a comprehensive plan with benchmarks, a timeline, and estimated budget. That was the motion that was considered at the last meeting, so. It doesn't really, the motion itself didn't go into great detail, so I think we may have just had a understanding issue. I was under the impression we were looking at elevation studies for all 5. I think some of staff was thinking that too, so, okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, just to be clear, it should be on the record, I did bring up that we had to check for asbestos. So, that was something we have to do in any building of this stage. So, we would not use that as an excuse, but we knew that asbestos might be an issue.
Yeah, I remember you were bragging pretty good about 2 days. That's what you could do it in.
Well,
And that's a compliment, by the way. I was
Yeah.
impressed with that, so no, that's
We
good.
did have some issues with getting
Sure.
into units, and I do want to make sure that we've got this on the record. The 2 units that we were unable to get into, the residents would not let us in. Those were 2 of the units that the residents came and testified last time. So that was a particular surprise that we were not able to get in and address those types of issues. And we definitely wanted to address the council's concern about those things. It was our understanding that the first building was really going to be sort of a process understanding of how we do this. Now we know that there's asbestos, so that we're going to have to do it. The same thing is going to have to happen in terms of an inspection for the next buildings. We also believe that we're going to have an understanding of, I think we'll probably see similar things for the units and the buildings, with maybe a 15 to 25% of the units have similar issues. We're assuming that it's going to be the same across the buildings. We don't know that, but what we're also getting is a budget for doing all of this and the costs for doing it and the timeline for doing it, because it is going to be a bit of a rolling situation. They do the RES, they come back, they identify, let's call it 6 to 12 spots in the building that need to be cut by the asbestos remediation. We go get them, they come in, they do that. That takes a period of time. Once they come back, they bore it, they see the scopes, or they look through, they identify an overall construction plan. But at the same time, it's going to be a new remediation asbestos, right? You're going to have to take down a larger panel potentially for those locations. That's going to get pitched to the asbestos folks as well. There will be a new 10-day notice for that portion of the work. There won't be a new one for the remainder of the spot inspections. The asbestos folks will come in, they will cut down their larger section. The new full repair folks will come in and match up the joists. We believe that's the most likely scenario, is that you're going to be talking about some level of joist marrying or brackets or bracing that's going to happen. And that comes in. The timeline for doing that is not extensive, but it's sort of a rotating through. You get one building and then that's what you're doing, and going to the next one and going to the next one. That's what we sort of anticipated. And at the same time, one of the concerns we did have before we were doing this first building, and I apologize if there was miscommunication, is would we be needing to move residents out and that kind of thing? It sounds like that's not the case here. If we had gone in and done all of the buildings, we do have alternate units and empty units, so it's possible that if we did have to move them out, then it would make sense that we do the first building, they've got units in the other buildings they can go to in the meantime. It doesn't sound like that's necessarily going to be the case. We do believe, though, we are presuming, based on what Tony said, that this is just going to be spots in the units, and there's a handful of units, and there might be a handful of joists in those. If we are to open it up and then we are surprised that the relative elevation surveys did not show what actually you have is 5, 6, 7 joists that all need to be done, then we're going to need to look at a different situation potentially. Or we open up areas where there wasn't deflection, because we're opening some of those up as well, and then you see that there are still joist issues. We would have to come back and revisit it, obviously, because the relative elevation surveys would not provide all that information. So we're hoping that what we can do is complete the process for one building, and then that will give us a roadmap, a timeline, an expectation, and what to do for each of the other buildings, and then to do those roughly in sequence, given that Tony doesn't have the staff to send people out to do all 5 buildings at exactly the same time. But that was the understanding, is that you would rotate through. He'd do the RES for one building and then continue on through that process.
Yeah, so I think, just so we're clear, that's typically a part of the process after determination's made and we get a timeline built out and approved, not necessarily before determination is made.
And I believe
Mr.
with
Childress,
our position,
go
and
ahead.
that's why I asked Tony this question straight away, is the building unsafe? I think that the conclusion that Tony had, and you can ask him again if he's, Tony, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you can ask him again to get the specific question. Even if it is what we expect when we open it up, which is some of the joists need to be repaired, that this is not an unsafe or dangerous building, and that that's a determination that we would think could be done based on this now. And I don't know, obviously the council has their own positions.
And I think one of the problems, and I would look to the building official to make this determination. And Tony, I'm trying not to hold you up. I really am. I promise.
No, I get it. This is important.
I'm sure you got some appetizers coming.
Yeah.
But the building alone was not determined by the building official to be a dangerous structure solely based on one issue, but a conglomerate of issues to include roof, electrical, plumbing, structural, all of the indications, correct? And so it's just, let's do this if that's okay, because I know Mr. Childress has to go. Can he be available by phone if you want to follow back up with him, or can we get him to join back?
Absolutely.
Later?
I've already said that.
So-
What I don't want to do is just sit around and listen to a bunch of talking, but you can text me. I'll get back on the phone, or
Okay.
and yeah, I'll be glad to come back out here and sit on the patio bench and
We can do that,
re-engage
'cause
as needed.
I'd like to hear from, since we have the building official here tonight, I'd like to hear from the building official. I'd like to hear from the city engineer following the reports that were submitted, and then kind of go back to discussion from there, if that's okay with you, Mayor.
That's fine.
And if there's no objection
No, I
with you
think
guys, okay.
that's perfect.
We appreciate you allowing Mr. Childress to.
Yeah, no, we really do appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. I'll be back on as soon as you text. Do think of one thing, though. This is a 1968 building. Almost every 1968 building is going to have some of these issues, not all of them. So just remember, you're not talking about a 1980s, this is an old building, and some of this is just age-related. But thank you. I'm going to go have my dinner with my family, but I'll be back if you text.
Thank you, Tony.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, so we're going to open it up. The City of Everman staff may proceed with this presentation of the staff report, evidence, and recommendations for the record.
And in the interest of time, I know that Chief Watley last meeting and Corporal Dabbs went through the presentation that was put together. If you can just highlight, after hearing some of the testimony tonight, if you don't mind, just highlighting some of the high points, low points, any of your concerns, what brought you to the conclusion as the building official to deem this dangerous?
Paul Coker, Bureau Veritas. So when I came out and did my initial inspection, the things I observed obviously was the electrical. I mean, there was a lot of electrical issues that needed to be addressed. I did have, see signs, that would lead you to believe there were, structural issues. And that's why, it was suggested that, they engage a structural engineer to assess, the structure and things like that. One thing that has not been talked about tonight is the plumbing. We have not talked anything about plumbing. Like Tony was saying before he got off, I mean, we're looking at a building that was built in the 60s. The plumbing is all cast iron under the slab. That old, chances are, is probably going to be pretty much, there's going to be bellies in it that hold water. That cast iron's going to, deteriorate, and then you've got issues with, sewage and stuff, up under slabs and things like that. Noticed also in several of the units, the mechanical, the air handlers that were in the units, I mean, they were just, hanging. They were not even, supported properly. there was a lot of signs of, decay in the wood, in the support systems and things like that. So there were a lot of issues that were observed, I would call kind of like property maintenance type issues, just a lack of, maintenance being, on the buildings to, keep them, in good shape. Like I said, the main thing is you want to make sure it is structurally safe, and that, that's what we've got the engineer to, assess that. I mean, if it's not structural, then we've got, issues there. But
The electrical issues and plumbing issues, any of those issues that you identified, would any of those be considered grandfathered or at code standard at the time?
well, okay, so there's no grandfathering in building code. But the, of the electrical that was observed, there was a lot, appeared to be aluminum wiring throughout. There was a lot of panel covers off, panel fronts off, and everything that I would say would be an imminent danger, for the tenants there, children, anybody walking by those buildings, because those panels were exposed on the outside of the buildings. And there were, there was issues that needed to be addressed, I would say, immediately. As far as plumbing, I know when I was out there that day, we had raw sewage running out of the building, out on the ground. I don't, know what kind of, what was causing that, but, there's a good assumption that, that could be from the, the cast iron under the slab. It could, there's possibilities. There could be, breaks in the lines and things, and why we're, having those issues. So.
Another thing I don't think that we discussed much tonight, which we may need to follow up with Mr. Childress on, but would be the roof. Can you elaborate on the roof structures that you saw?
The roof structure, when we went up, we did go up on one of the roofs of one of the buildings, and it was, very spongy in spots, very uneven, which, kind of showed signs of, maybe, some kind of structure.
Sorry, that noise is actually your mic. It's losing connection. You may have to put it on the stand to keep a good signal back to it. I want to make sure we get everything you say on the record, so I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, as far as the roof, like I said, it was, very spongy in, spots, which would lead you to believe that, there could be some, issues with ceiling joist or the rafters and, other structural issues. So that would be something, again, structural engineer would need to, look at and assess, to see, what kind of issues we were having with it.
I don't have any other questions for him if you want to allow them to ask, or if anybody else has any.
Well, do we have any other, is that all we have from the city side?
Just for him.
Yeah, I didn't know if anybody else wanted to speak before we.
Oh, well, I do want to ask the city engineer, if you want me to go ahead with him, Mayor.
Yeah, we'll do that then.
Okay.
Then we'll let them ask
All right,
questions.
perfect.
Should
Probably
we
already-
ask questions to Mr. Coker now, or?
We're going to follow up. We'll have you follow up with both of them here right after, sorry. Can you, after hearing tonight, I think you know what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, based on the city's inspectors' reports, the information that's been provided today, both state that there's structural deficiencies. They've completed a small portion of the testing. So, at this point, if you were to ask me, I, really can't confirm whether the rest of the buildings are structurally sound or not, until that testing is done. So to ask, are the buildings safe? I would say we don't know that until the testing is done, point blank, yes.
Okay, so you can go ahead with your follow-up questions.
And some of this may be, maybe the council may remember. Mr. Coker, did you ever, we were here last time, I know you weren't able to be here. Did you ever get a chance to see the documentation about the repairs and the photos that the apartments presented about the fixes that have been done to the boxes? Okay. And the idea was they needed to be covered up and secured in some way.
Right.
And did you ever get a chance to see the invoices about the sewage or the plumbing repairs or what had been relating to that sewage incident?
No, I have not.
I think that's basically, I just wanted to make sure that we had talked about that. And then in Tony's report, I believe it's page 3 of the report, findings to date number 1C. He mentions that the roof was observed to have localized areas of depression, which is indicative of a failing or failed roof joist member. That was less frequent than the floor system and not found everywhere. Was that consistent with what you had observed?
Yeah, and I also, I know when I was going through some of the units, and I've got it on here, it looks like building 928, apartment 12, it did look like we had an apparent roof leak. I mean, because you could actually see the stain in the ceiling, like water had got, started coming through. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further. We'll be judicious with the time.
Okay, so where are we at on here? So we'll do this. Oh, we already did this, so, okay.
I don't think that they've done everything. I think they just addressed Mr. Childress. They may have
Okay.
additional.
So they may want to.
Okay, so do you guys have a presentation?
Above and beyond what you've already, with Mr. Childress.
Yeah, the only presentation we'll give to follow up on what Mr. Childress has already presented is, first and foremost, I apologize for any miscommunication that may have existed from the last hearing as to what we were planning to do or how we were going to go about investigating the rest of the property. We're here because of the burn unit and the burn building, which is building 929. And the thought process was, okay, let's go look to determine whether or not these are systemic issues in the remainder of the building and be able to extrapolate that to the rest of the property. I understand that there were tenants here that certainly raised issues the last time the board convened and we were before the board. Again, this is not a property owner or a management group that tends or wants to neglect its tenants by any stretch or imagination. Like Mr. Childress mentioned, this is a property that's, I think, 6 decades old. And I think we're, as Corporal Dabbs outlined the last time, the 5th or 6th owner of the property. And these are joists and floor joists that were constructed in the 60s, covered up with asbestos popcorn ceiling, and never to be opened again. And this is the product of what happens just to the age of assets. And I think what's probably most important that I'd like to point out to the board of the materials that we submitted outside of the engineering items is, excuse me, the list of short but concise and thoughtful comments and affirmations provided by several tenants at the property with respect to not only the condition of the property, but the management of the property, the things their children enjoy at the property, the things their family enjoys at the property, the changes that have been seen in recent history compared to previous management. And what's unique about those tenant statements are that most of them are not about the same thing. They're not all about whether or not there's roof leaks, or whether or not they like the people who manage it. These are all different statements as to why people and tenants who live at the property enjoy living at the property and feel that they've got a management and ownership that is concerned about them and addresses the issues as they are raised so that they can enjoy the place that they call home. Mr. Spencer alluded to this at the beginning, to try to stay on a macro level, and I'm going to do the best to try to stay there. Ultimately, we are here, and the board's determination is to figure out whether or not this is a dangerous and substandard building and property. Dangerous and substandard by way of causing risk of life, safety issues to its tenants, to the visitors, to the people that work there, to the city staff that visit there and report to calls or whatever, that anybody that is stepping foot on this property. And that's something that we take seriously and that have taken very extraordinary steps from both a time and money standpoint in getting the studies and the testing and everything else done. Something that's going to continue, as Mr. Childress mentioned, for the rest of the property. But the important thing here is that this is not a property that is subject of collapse. This is not a property that is imminently going to fall or cave in on a tenant or a resident there. Mr. Coker was wise to make the observations he made when he did his observation reports back in February. And as Mr. Coker mentioned, his visual observations led to the recommendation to hire a structural engineer to look at real data, to look at the real science, and determine whether or not what appears to be visually questionable areas and property conditions really have manifested in a dangerous, substandard condition that causes risk of life and safety to the tenants. Mr. Childress has taken that data in several weeks of investigation and inspection and has said without equivocation that this is not a property that is subject of collapse. This is not a property that is subject of creating a life safety hazard for its tenants. This is not a dangerous or substandard building. And this is not a dangerous or substandard property. This is a property that is 50 or 60 years old, that has localized area floor joists that need to be investigated, inspected, and repaired. This is a property that has boxes that need to be covered, and if they haven't been covered to date, will be. This is a property, as Mr. Coker mentioned, that needs some maintenance, and it's going to get that maintenance, as it has. And this ownership group, by virtue of now this being my fourth appearance before this board, and I've enjoyed every one of them, is committed to making sure that this is a property that will continue to be safe for its tenants and for its residents, and a place where their current tenants can continue to enjoy to live. But ultimately, we do not believe, and based on the expert opinion and data supporting Mr. Childress's testimony that you all heard, that this is a dangerous and substandard building that needs to be part of the board's consideration moving forward on that basis and that basis alone. That is not to say that this ownership group is not committed to completing the repairs. This is not to say the ownership group is going to stop making the repairs. That's not the circumstance, and that's not the case. As Mr. Childress said, the intent here is to finish the relative elevation surveys, identify the isolated localized spots that need to be further investigated and repaired, and to ensure that the structural integrity of this building continues for many more decades. Of course, we're happy to answer and available to answer any questions the board may have.
You may have to push it or hold it down. I think that one's been, I'm sorry.
So you're saying that you are dedicated to get all the repairs complete as the engineer sees fit?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do have a question regarding the financing portion. So there is and I know we've discussed this in our staff conversations with you. There is going to be a concern related to the affordability and financing based on this. Is there any plan in place for the financial portion of being able to afford these repairs and fees to move forward?
Yeah, ownership is committed to commit and pay for any capital necessary to do these repairs and the continued inspection and investigation by Mr. Childress. Just to give the board an idea, the scope of the inspection and the investigation just on the engineering side of Building 929 exceeded $35,000, and that doesn't even include the asbestos contractor that still needs to be hired to do the 12 by 12 cuts, nor the application and submittals to the state in order to do that remediation. And that's just the testing portion of it for one building, and it's been paid, Mr. Childress has done the work. There's a financial commitment to ensure that the work is done. And if, for no other reason, if that work isn't done and this board makes a substandard determination, that's the end of the game, right? That the property is condemned, it's lost, it may not exist anymore if that's the board's determination. Ownership is committed to making sure that this property stays afloat and built and structurally sound for the foreseeable future, and they're committed to committing whatever capital is necessary to doing that.
And does the client, and I don't mean any offense by asking this, but does the client have the means of being able to do so? I know that I have not looked here recently, but I know that it was proposed or presented to the board on the 16th about the liens that were already in existence and some financial considerations, so I know that that's a concern of the board.
You know, and we still have not been able to locate or determine where these liens continue to exist. We have not seen them, and again, if the city has them and provides them, obviously we're happy to address them and be specific. I have not been able to locate, you know, where or from who filed the liens that are being referenced.
Sure, so it's on the open source website through Tarrant County. You're able to publicly search those, and that's where we pull that data from, and we can get you a copy of that. I thought we had shared that with you before, but we can definitely provide you with a copy of that. Okay. That's all the questions I've got, Mayor.
I just have one comment. If the board agrees to allow you to make the repairs, is it going to be done in a timely manner, or is this going to drag out 2 or 3 years? I mean, we want something done now.
Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted to talk about the timeline. What we expect is that one building's worth of repairs is probably another 30 days, 929, right? Because we need to get in there, get the asbestos, and then get the plan together, get the joists married up, that kind of thing. I think that's what you're going to be anticipating, a similar timeline for those buildings. Although, because it's going to be on a little bit of a rolling basis, it's not going to be 1 to 2 months per building, because I think that we're going to have RES done for the next building, and then once they're done with that, while the asbestos folks are coming in to do the remediation, they move on to the next building, and so on to sort of cascade along. The joist repairs, which is what we really anticipate is what's going to happen, that is a very minimal process once it's opened up. And the cost on that is also relatively minimal and shouldn't be something extensive. The one thing we don't know right now, and we're trying to figure out, is what's the cost of asbestos remediation. I don't anticipate that it's going to be exorbitant to do the exploratory holes. I also don't anticipate it's going to be exorbitant to do the next step of remediation, but we just don't know that cost yet. But that's the timeline of what we're looking at. If we were to go in, for example, and do the joist remediation in the burned building, that would be a few days. I think it's a couple of day process at most to go through and do it, because it really is, you cut a 2x4, you go up there, you put it installed, and then you cover it back up with appropriate sheetrock or something along those lines. We haven't seen anything that has signified a long-term or a big time on that. And the impression that we got from Tony based on the roof inspection, I don't think it was in the full report, is that the roof doesn't need to actually be replaced itself either, that there's just some structural members that need to be done. So I don't anticipate that it is going to be a long period of time, but the big thing we just don't know is, what do we look under and see? I mean, I think we're hoping, the feasibility that we're looking at is, I think, 30 days to do that work, assuming those 10-day windows for the asbestos notations, because there's one 10-day, and then the inspection, and then a second 10-day, and then do the remediation work. So that's what we're anticipating, but we can't be entirely certain until we've done the first bit.
Residents, for the inconvenience, how much of a notice are you giving them for working on their apartment?
For the actual, I'm sorry, if you don't mind me asking a clarifying question, for the actual repair work or for the entry? We have not reached that phase yet, because we have to cut the holes first to determine which units would need the notice. Obviously, as Mr. Childress alluded to, and I can say on behalf of ownership, that if there is a massive inconvenience or a large area or something that would make it not a habitable place for the tenant to be there during the time of repair, obviously the intent is to move them to another unit so they're not disturbed. And that again goes, as Mr. Formey mentioned, the reason for why you kind of phase these projects sometimes. But the notice that would be provided would be as far advanced notice as we possibly can. I think Don't quote me on this, and I should know this as the lawyer, but I think it's a 3-day notice absent emergency or life safety concerns to provide notice for the tenant prior to entry. So obviously that would be provided to each and every tenant prior to entering their home. And the idea is to schedule it out and make sure we try to give as much notice as possible and not disrupt their day-to-day life.
Any other questions?
I'm on. You keep saying that ownership, yeah, I'm too loud. You keep saying that ownership is committed, and they want this to be a good thing, and they want to be good owners, et cetera. If y'all have owned this for 6 years, why is it in this shape? Why hasn't the management of the buildings themselves listened to the tenants when they've said, there's a yard full of sewage? The stairwell has become detached. Why hasn't the management, the local management, who should be the watchdog, the bulldog, if you will, go out there and look at this stuff, report it to ownership, and get the darn things repaired? I just keep seeing in my head that nobody's doing anything, and it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. I'm way too hot. I don't understand that, and I just want to know that if ownership is this committed to it, where have they been? Raking in money and not caring, and this is the shape we're in. That has got to stop, and the management locally has got to stop. Now, I know we don't have any control over that, and we shouldn't, but that has got to stop.
And I'd like to add to that, the issue of caring is we still can't get them to apply for a permit. So.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you the short version of a long answer, which is why you'll see in many of the tenant statements that we submitted, I think maybe 3 or 4 of them mentioned, the management has really turned things around. The management has got things under control. The property is really turning around. And the reason for that is Mr. Moskowitz, for many of the city staff who have met him previous to these hearings, has been at the property for about the last year or so, I want to say, right? Year and a half. Prior to that, there was another management company in place from the inception of ownership through Mr. Moskowitz and his property management team taking over. That management company was excused from its duties for a very specific reason, because they weren't very good. And Mr. Moskowitz has now taken the reins of the property over the last year. And as I mentioned, that's why you see the allusion from these tenant statements to how things have really turned around. It is not an excuse for what happened under the previous management. Ownership is ownership. They own the property, they take the good, the bad, and they're responsible for it. But that change and that course correction was made a year ago when we brought in a new property management company and began taking the repair and maintenance, or the R&M steps that may not be the sexy pearl of the eye when you repaint a building or repave a parking lot that everyone seems to be drawn on, but really taking steps towards the repair and maintenance side of things, which is for no other reason why you have the tenants affirming the fact that we are a management company that has really addressed issues in recent memory. And I alluded to this last time, I mean, the property's value and taxable improvement value has increased, I think, 35% over the last 3 years. The improvement value, not the land. This is a ownership group that has made repairs, that has made improvements consistently. It wasn't enough for the first 4 years or 3 years of ownership, and they're committed to making sure that it is enough moving forward, and are continuing that effort as we speak right now to make sure that this is a property that's well maintained, safe, and habitable for its tenants.
Well, I just want to remind you, the last couple of meetings, we've had residents show up here that have felt quite differently than what you're stating. They were not happy with the complex, and they were just waiting to get out of there. So that contradicts what you're telling us now. We had one individual, I think the last meeting, that didn't speak English, that was in favor of you guys, but prior to that, everybody's been, it's been negative. So, but.
Yeah, I've got, so I was speaking with the Bureau Veritas guys over here, and so I have one question, and it goes back to what the city manager's point is. I'm going to play a hypothetical game. Let's say that we we all are in agreement that while the structure is in very, very bad shape, we say it's not an immediate imminent life safety, but we're taking in the totality of circumstances here, and so the reason why we're up here is because of plumbing, electrical, all the above. We haven't seen an electrical report, we haven't seen a plumbing report, we haven't seen, and y'all mentioned about the roof. I hope you're speaking to the roof structure, not necessarily the roof cap, because we all know, we've all seen the leaks that have occurred, so that would be a roof replacement. We haven't seen any of those inspections, we haven't seen any of that determination. So if that be the case, and you haven't had an electrician that has made their way inside of any of the apartments on 929, so with that being said, how is there, if we're basing our determination that this is a substandard, unsafe structure based on wholly everything, how can y'all, from that perspective, be able to give the determination that it's not unsafe without you have one of the 5 or so analysis and engineers and consultants that have been requested to get eyes on? So now when we get an electrician in there and they start to pull sheetrock, they find this issue and this issue and this issue, which we have, as Childress alluded to, he even used the basis of the 6 apartments. We saw that problem and we're seeing that consistent across. Well, we saw a lot of electrical issues in those apartments as well. So we're going to see, it's reasonable to think that we're going to see that across the rest of them. So when we start to do those inspections, we're going to find unsafe conditions. So my question to you is, how can you sit and definitively state that it's not unsafe and substandard for life safety without we have one of the 5 that are required, that are needed? That's just my question.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer that. The reason is, and the first part of it is there may have been some confusion or miscommunication with Mr. Childress, but the electrician went into all of the interior units of 929 as part of his inspection. It also included the exterior of building 929, and when the one issue that was the life safety issue was discovered, the remainder of the property was inspected to ensure that there were no other imminent life safety issues present on the property. The only life safety issue discovered was the conduit issue, which we've mentioned a couple of times, requires pulling a permit to repair. He did go inside the units, and if there were imminent life safety issues observed inside of those units, irrespective of receipt of his report, they would have been notified to Mr. Childress in the same manner the exterior issue was, and the steps to remediate would have taken place. So we know that the electrician has gone through the interior of 929 of the buildings to check the inside of the units. We know that the electrician has looked at the exterior of the buildings to determine life safety and has discovered one, which we've again talked about. The remainder of the portion of your question with respect to the other issues of the property may not have been discussed today. Obviously, the purpose of today was to come back from the last hearing with the engineering data, but certainly that doesn't ignore or excuse what was submitted to the city at the last hearing, which would be from the plumbing standpoint and the plumbing side of things. It was an isolated sewage issue that was backed up on the day that the city was there. We provided the city with the documentation of the line going into the sewer to ensure that the sewer cleanouts are clean and it's not a systemic issue at the property. The isolated sewage issue was also repaired immediately, and that documentation was also provided to the city last time. Now, I think the last issue that you had mentioned was the roof, and again, Mr. Childress has noted that in his report. The data that has the actual numbers on the relative elevation survey, if you look at the last page, that is the ceiling data of the second floor units measuring the underside of the roof and checking the structural members of the roof. And in this consistent manner as the floor joists, there are isolated areas that need to be opened and re-inspect and checked and reinforced if need be upon discovery of any framing members that need to be reinforced or sister joisted, as Mr. Childress said. So we are taking the position that this is not a dangerous or substandard property with the assumption that there are floor joists that need to be repaired in the same manner as we've noticed in 929, with the assumption that there's roofing members, structural members that need to be repaired in the same manner as what we've observed in 929, and with the same electrical issues that need to be repaired through the rest of the property as we've seen in 929.
And I'm sorry, you mentioned an electrical report. I am trying, did you submit an electrical report to us? I'm trying to locate one.
Clark Electrical is the electrician that was hired as a subcontractor for Mr. Childress to do the electric side of it. His report is the one Mr. Childress had mentioned he is awaiting receipt of as far as the comprehensive
Okay.
report. But any life safety issues would have been immediately notified to us absent the report, whether or not that's coming or not.
Mayor, if you don't have any other questions, I do have a recommendation for you, but
Okay, so, all right, I don't, anybody have any questions?
Just want to feed into what Ms. Mackey was saying. I do live around the area. I did see the change with management when it first came in. Now things are deteriorating. The upkeeping is not being upkept. So I do see where, yes, we wanted to come in, make a change, but then we kind of stopped. And so we cannot continue doing that for the tenants there. We want to keep the upkeep all times, meaning the fencing, everything surrounding the apartment complex. And I've seen a lot of that deterioration recently. So if the new management company was keeping up with it, we wouldn't see any of that recently. We did the change, wonderful. Started declining, and so what's going to happen next? Are we just going to stop? Are we going to continue? So we definitely want the safety for the tenants, the safety for the neighborhood, the safety for the whole apartment complex, but the upkeep has to be done all the time, not just stopped or just, oh, it's just the fence, we don't have to fix it. No, yes, we want the upkeep and we want the management to be in charge to take care of that at all times. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Are you guys done with your presentation?
Yeah, yes, Mayor, that would conclude our presentation.
Okay. What's your recommendation?
I guess my mic is dying. Whether you want to do it before or after public comment, but I'm going to recommend that under section 551071, seek advice from city attorney, we go into executive session.
Okay, so the time is 7:53. We're going to go into executive session.
Mayor, go ahead and read the whole paragraph prior to and then that.
This one here?
That paragraph.
Yeah. Pursuant to section 551.071, chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, council reserves the right to convene into executive sessions from time to time as deemed necessary during this meeting to receive advice from its attorney on any posted agenda item as permitted by law. Additionally, council may convene into executive session to discuss the following. Section 551.071, pending or contemplated litigation, or to seek advice on city attorney. So once again, the time is 7:53 and we're going to executive session. Back to order from executive session. The time is 8:32. No action was taken. Now we will open up to, let's see. Hold on, let me see where I'm at. Oh, okay. Now I'll accept public comments. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. So do we need to do this? We already done this. Pretty much, and rebuttal and,
I think we're past all that.
okay, so make sure.
Yeah, just down to deliberation,
Okay,
and what you just.
close,
public
okay.
hearing, so, yeah.
All right, so comments have been heard. We're all wishing to speak, therefore I now close the public hearing. The time is 8:33, and now the building commission will now deliberate this matter.
Mayor, I do have some comments, if that's okay.
All right, why don't you start it off?
Okay. All right, so we began this venture back on February 14th when the inspection was initially performed following several complaints. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue and work between the city and ownership. We're now at day 97 from the date of inspection. We have been working with ownership's representation. We've been working with engineers. I am not satisfied. Personally, I'm not satisfied with the information that we've been getting back. I feel it's just not to par. It's not what we've been asking for, and it's not what we've been looking for, and it is missing significant detail, as even the engineer has noted, that we just don't have enough information. That's frustrating. That's frustrating because us as a city, the citizens look to this board to be able to make decisions that are in the best interest of the public safety and the public health. And it's tough to make a decision on a case such as this without all the proper information. And this is a big case. This is not a small undertaking, and I think the city has gone above and beyond what would standardly be the case. We've provided a continuance, we've provided a deferment already above and beyond, neither of which were mandated or required, and in most cases not necessary. But we've done so here in the best interest of trying to provide ownership opportunities to remedy the situation and get the information that we need to be able to make a decision. The reporting from Childress is great as far as the structural engineer, but still falls short to what I believe the board and staff's expectation was in encompassing the other other four buildings. It doesn't seem to address anything related to plumbing, and it's just not very in-depth, understandably because of asbestos, but again, we're at 97 days. We should be moving a little further and faster than this in the interest of the people who reside there. Again, the victims in all this, for lack of a better word, are the tenants. And we have to come up with a solution that best suits the tenants and a decision, the board does. And so I feel there's a significant lack of information. There's some lack in transparency. Another key piece of information that's needed is the financial data. We don't have a timeline yet for repairs, and we don't have financial data. We need to get financial data. I understand ownership's commitment. I understand the resolve. I understand they're expressing this, but we need more than words, unfortunately, for the board to be able to make a proper decision. We need to see finances. We need to be able to see financial models and how this is going to be funded and pursued through, because that is a board consideration, is not only can the repairs be done, is it feasible for the repairs to be done? And feasibility includes a funding piece. So I think that's something else that is missing here. One of the other concerns, and I may be surprising ownership with this, but one of the other concerns that came up was the termite inspector that said that there were no termites there. We just found out here recently, and I don't know, again, I'll provide ownership a copy of this so you have it, but their franchise license through the state, the Secretary of State, their license to operate was involuntarily ended prior to the inspection. So there's a lot of issues here, and I think we're just lacking the necessary information. I don't want to I would hate to see the board make a hasty decision that is not in the best interest of both ownership and the citizens, but time is running out. The citizens that reside there are looking to the board to make a decision. The clock is ticking. We need to come up with a plan to move forward. And this is now the third hearing we've had on this, where I feel like we're just kind of spinning our wheels. We can't continue to spin our wheels. So therefore, my recommendation, staff recommendation would be, I would recommend a deferment for 30 or 45 days with a last-ditch effort and chance for ownership to provide all of the necessary documents that this board needs to make a proper decision. I just don't think we can go past that. We have got to make a decision, but we don't want to make a decision without all of the facts. So that would be a staff recommendation.
Okay, so open up the floor to the board. Anybody have any comments? Do we have a,
This is hot and I'm trying to get away from it. I agree. I think 45 days would be it, or whatever the next council meeting is around that 45 days. I mean, we can't go 45 days if it's Sunday afternoon, you know what I mean? But this is it, as far as providing what we need to make an informed decision.
Just for the board's awareness, so the meeting schedule in June 25th, it's roughly, what is that, 30, 33, 34 days from now. So second Tuesday in July would be July the 9th. That would be pretty close to 45 days at that point. If that's what the board chose to do, that would be the recommendation. And I think 45 days is more than ample, considering we're at 97 days into the inspection. These issues, and I know that time has been limited since representation has been involved, but ownership's been aware of these issues since the fire, and the fire was long before the inspection and the warrant that needed to be issued in order for us to go in and to abate these issues. So I think 45 days is ample to gather information for us, for the board, I think, to make a decision. I just don't know how much longer we can keep deferring and not having all the information. The board needs to make a decision.
Just to clarify. Okay, just to clarify, are you saying 45 days for a hearing, or 45 days to provide the information and then we'll schedule a hearing? Do you want the information, do you want the hearing, or I guess the question is, do you want the information before the hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so do you want the information in 45 days? Do you want the hearing in 45 days?
What do we want?
I will tell you, it is better for staff if we can get the information before the hearing, because that gives our engineer an opportunity to review it. Unfortunately, our engineer walked in tonight having to review it almost instantaneously as he walked in. Same with our building officials and fire marshals. So if we are able to get the information prior to the meeting, even if it's a few days prior to the meeting,
Yes.
that would be helpful.
Yes, this is the second time we've had
Date calculator, stand by. I'm pulling up.
things come in at us that we haven't looked at. We have lots of pictures and lots of words, but we can't look at it because
Okay.
we get it as we sit down.
Could we say 30 days and 45 days for the hearing?
So 45 days from now would be July the 5th. July 11th would be the council meeting, the normal council meeting night, in which we can set for another joint hearing.
July 11th?
Yes, ma'am, because we meet the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays.
But July 11th is a Thursday.
Oh, hold on, I'm sorry.
We're moving.
I was in
Well, he had
June.
wrong-
I was in
pulled
June. So July the 9th, I apologize.
Now, are you moving your meeting?
Yes,
No, we are not moving the meeting.
to the 2nd and
From
4th.
Tuesday to Thursday. We're moving it from first and third Tuesdays to second and fourth Tuesdays.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So that means that if the requirement was to have them submit the information, that would be received by Friday the 5th and could be shared and give staff an opportunity to review it over the weekend, which I'm sure they will do on the 4th of July weekend. But it will give them Monday and Tuesday during the day to be able to review. It will give the board an opportunity to review and have that before the meeting, so. Sorry, your mic now. I apologize. You may have to hold it down.
Would that give enough time for engineering to review and question?
Our engineer?
Yes,
On July 4th weekend.
on July 4th weekend. 7 days, yeah. 7 days prior to the meeting.
Okay.
What day would that fall on?
July 2nd. Because our meeting is July 9th.
So that would be 42 days.
For them to have all the reports and everything to us. Excuse me.
4th is Thursday.
Between 45 days or 30 days for the hearing?
Well, I believe that's a question that is being deliberated on now, is what you guys would like to do. It was originally posed 45 days to have the data back. Councilwoman Renfro is saying she would like to have it a week before the hearing. That would be 42 days if you were to schedule the hearing on the 9th. If you chose to keep it at 45 days, we could still receive it by Friday the 5th, and we could just simply schedule the hearing on July the 23rd, which would give 3 weeks' time for engineers and building officials to review it, but that's, okay.
Got it.
One of the items on the city council agenda is going to a 4-day work week.
That will not affect this. The city staff that receives the reports won't be affected by that.
Okay.
We can still distribute reports in time. That's not a problem.
Okay.
I don't want that to be a concern. I will check my email on
I
Fridays,
ju-
I
I
promise.
just don't want to miss something, right? Okay, so what are we looking at? July 2nd,
So,
all data. Plans, reports, inspections, birthday invitations, everything.
so we're clear, whenever the motion is made, we need to be specific on the date. Would be my recommendation, be specific on the date of both the information and the hearing. And I'm stomping all over the attorney's job. I'm going to hush now.
No, that's good.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So 42 days? Is that the number of days we've talked?
I think you just put the dates,
Yeah, I would just say the date.
the dates, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think, and it may be worthwhile, and you don't have to, but it might be worth asking if there's any legitimate reason why this could not be accomplished by that time, so that there's no argument coming back from then. When we come back on the 9th, that we don't have an argument at that point of why wasn't this completed then. It would just be my recommendation if you wanted to consider if they have an argument on why it would need to be longer than 42 days.
So we need to ask them, or?
You don't have to, it's just my recommendation.
Okay. No, that's what I'm saying, that's the recommendation.
We were gonna do that anyway.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
So, well,
we're
would you
trying.
be able to have the reports done on all 5 buildings in 42 days?
And information that the city and staff would like to see in that 42-day period, just so I can properly answer the question.
So the reality is that we have a building official who has declared these buildings being a substandard and dangerous structure. And the information that we have received has not proven otherwise. I understand that may be the stance of your expert and the engineer, but there just simply hasn't been enough data to state that it's not a danger and to contradict the building official's opinion that it is still a danger. Am I right in saying this so far? Nod's good. Okay. We need data. The RES reports that come back would be great. And if we're able to complete the boring on these buildings to assure that there's no structural damage, so that way our engineer can review and approve, what we're seeking is that our engineer and our building official can have enough data to agree with your engineer and your expert. There's just simply not enough information for them to do that right now. We're kind of at a stalemate of, not saying that your engineer's wrong, but there's just simply not enough information for them to go and agree with that. But we also don't have the electrical report. I know that's referenced in this report, but we don't have the electrical report. The roof is very simply addressed in this. It probably needs to be addressed a little bit more with either an inspection by Childress, a thorough inspection by Childress at the rafters. I think I would look to our building official, and our engineer, what other information specifically would you need to agree with their engineer's opinion that this is not a dangerous or substandard structure?
Well, I would say we would need an assessment of the sewer system, or the plumbing throughout the building. I'd look at also the mechanical in the building, all the mechanical units, along with, the electrical, obviously the structural. I think with that, we could probably. Oh, with the, okay. I guess I'm not understanding.
Just throwing this out there, would it be fair to say that the report submitted on May 21 by Childress that was reviewed tonight mentions elevation surveys, mapping of distress, exterior facade, inspection of roof, electric, asbestos, let's see, in addition to things that are not mentioned in this report, which plumbing, was there something else that was not mentioned?
Mechanical.
Mechanical. That those things for all buildings would be provided to council, and I'm talking specifically to our building official. The thing, have you looked at this? Have you had a chance to look at this report? Okay, so their report was a progress field observation report on what Childress found with regard to Building 929 and what they had planned to provide to us, what they did, what they have, what they're working on, so forth. Have that same information for every building along with plumbing and mechanical. And I think electrical is mentioned, but yeah. Is that what you're looking for?
And so ownership understands. I understand the one building at a time approach. Unfortunately, we have a declaration by a building official on all 5 buildings. We have to make a determination on all 5 buildings. We can't overlook that declaration by the building official. So I know we've mentioned this before. I know that's a heavy lift. I know it's a big ask. But I think we're trying to be as amenable as possible to get there, but we've just got to get there.
May I ask 2 more questions? First, if you could clarify what's meant by mechanical as it relates to any of the reports that are being requested. And also for the scope of the property, I understand the board would like to see the information that Childress has provided in this report for the property itself and all the buildings given the building official's determination. But the property-wide data and report, does the board contemplate that being in the same manner as the building official, which is a sampling of units in each building, or which I believe is what the dangerous and substandard condition is based upon? Or is the board looking for something along the lines of what we did for Building 929, which is a comprehensive unit, every single unit inspection and report?
Well, I mean, I would go back and argue that we've provided a copy of the inspection report from Bureau Veritas. a detailed inspection report, which ownership has a copy, you have a copy of that, right? So whatever data is provided from ownership would need to either contradict what the building official has provided or identify and provide a plan for remediation of what the building official has identified. I don't think we can go into specific detail on step by step what it is the expectation is, but without information that either negates what the building official has provided to us or identifies and provides a remediation plan for what the building official has identified, this board will have to decide in favor of the building official and it being a substandard structure. There's just no way. I mean, we have to have information otherwise from what the building official has provided. So I would say I would base your data off the reports that were provided from the building official and those inspections.
Well, and to clarify that, I think what you're asking is slightly different, and I think it's got to be comprehensive because the statute 214.01 requires that when this board decides if it in fact decides that this is a dangerous structure, but that they're going to allow your client time to repair, the code requires if they're going to give your client more than 30 days, they have to have a plan for repairs. So I don't see how it could be anything but comprehensive. And if they're going to give your client more than 90 days, it's got to be a detailed plan with financials and all of that information. And if you want to know what I'm referring to, it's 214 001 H, I, J, and K. So I think all it can be, I think it has to be comprehensive for this board to be able to work with your client.
On the mechanical?
Yeah, it's going to be your chillers, your air conditioner. You want to elaborate on?
Yeah, air handling units, and specifically, I mean, some of those air handlers in those units are inside the individual units. I mean, some of them look like they were ready to fall out of the ceiling because, I mean, the supports that are holding them, I mean, they were rotted and everything. And so there needs to be a good assessment, of all that in all the units. So,
So either information that's comprehensive to contradict the building official's determination and inspection reports, or a proposed timeline and plan for repairs of what was noted by the building official, as I understand it.
Not or, and.
And. I'm happy to call Mr. Childress, just to verify. My instinct is that 45 days for that level of detail for 120 units is going to be difficult, but I will, forgive the lack of knowledge on the procedure. I don't know if I can recess the board, but if the board were to recess, I'm happy to call Mr. Childress just before I give an answer that's not the right answer. Thank you. May we step outside? Thank you.
So then, we're not adjourning, we're.
We're reset.
57, we're going to recess the Building and Standard Commission meeting. Item A, or consideration possible action, item A, resolution number 2024-05-06. Oh, do we have any citizens' comments? Mindy? All right. I just jumped right over that, didn't I? Okay, consideration possible action. You just want me to read it again, that's what it is. Resolution number 2024-05-06, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Everman, Texas, approving amendments to the city's personnel manual to make necessary adjustments to accommodate a 4-day work period for certain municipal departments and providing an effective date. Oh, yeah, I'll entertain a motion. My brain is fried. Motion made and seconded, now discussion.
Okay. So I did send out a staff report related to this. I made sure to also print a copy so everybody had that there in front of them in case you needed to reference it tonight. This is for one of the options that was discussed. This seemed to be the more prevalent option, and this was, quite honestly, this was the easiest option for us to develop policy arrangements for, because the other option was going to require significant policy overhaul, and it was going to require significant payroll server setting overhaul as well to accommodate. So if the goal was, and unless I misunderstood, but if the goal was to do a trial run for the summer, then it's going to take me a few more weeks to try to work this out. I got to converse with Paylocity, set up meetings, see how we can change payroll settings in Paylocity to account for the varying departments that we've got. So I just brought this one to you tonight because I was under a time crunch. If this was amenable to the council, we can move forward with this. The city of Glen Heights also just did the exact same thing, and Victoria shared with me a report that they had just distributed, and that's what the copy, if you look at the top, it says all data provided is for the months 10/22 through 4/20/23. This is a staff report from that city that she provided to me that I've passed out for you tonight. And some of the things that they've seen. So they've seen a significant reduction by going to a 4-day work week in cost as it relates to gas, electricity. Fuel was a significant savings. They saw a decrease in sick time used. They have not received any official complaints regarding to a 4-day work week. The senior center, which doesn't apply to us, and the library doesn't apply to us. Employee morale has increased. Most report that more is accomplished in the 10-hour day than in an 8-hour day. And we are receiving more applicants for our open positions. Scheduling of large improvement projects on city facilities has become easier too. Their study reported that at the time that they were looking at this, they had identified 6 cities that were on 4-day work weeks, and that has now gone up to 10. School districts, apparently there were 76 that were on 4-day work weeks at the time, and that number has rose to 86. And you can see their resources that they cite here. I did not do the research for this, so I can't really speak to their report, but I do think it's indicative and supportive of what we've been talking about. So this resolution would amend several of our personnel policies. One of those amendments that probably needs some discussion is related to holiday. So in order to compensate appropriately for a holiday, if we were to go to a 4-day work week, we would be converting to a 10-hour day. We would need to adjust our holiday pay to being 10 hours. So that would actually increase the holiday pay. When we increase holiday pay, we actually increase the city's liability and the city's budget on that liability. So to offset that, I did propose that we remove We had a total of 13 holidays. I did propose that we removed 2 of those identified holidays, one of those being Good Friday. I felt that was appropriate. If we weren't even going to be working on Friday, it probably wasn't going to be a big deal. The other one being President's Day. And I don't know how to best politically put this without sounding harsh, but I was trying to find maybe the least impactful holiday. And not that President's Day isn't important. I don't want anybody to think that's what I'm saying. I know it is important. I fully support President's Day, but it just seemed to be the least impactful. There are many cities that don't observe President's Day, so we were in line with that. Many businesses don't observe President's Day. Many do. Many other cities do too, either way. But that would help offset our holiday liability for our budget so we don't have a significant budget impact by moving to this. There is always an exception as well for religious holidays for any employees that have any specific religious needs. That part didn't change. In the staff report I handed you, I made sure to highlight the specific changes because I know it's not highlighted in the resolution, so that way you can see precisely what was changed in that staff report. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If council does choose to, if your direction is that you want me to go back and do more research at figuring out how to be open on Fridays for half a day, I'm happy to do that. Council would just need to vote down this resolution. I'll go back to the table. It'll probably be July before I can bring that back to you because we are also jumping off the cliff of budget right now. So it's just going to take a back seat.
My only thought about President's Day is President's Day, but it's a long dry spell between the middle of January and the end of May with no holiday off. But if we're not coming in on Fridays, that tempers that quite a bit. So I'm okay with this. Let's give it a shot. I think that's my opinion.
Council would need to decide if you're going to pass this resolution. If you notice that the effective date of the resolution is blank. So council will need to determine an effective date. That effective date impacts how much notice we give to the citizens. So I would recommend 2 to 3 weeks at least before we make this effective. That way it gives us enough time to put out publications, educate. If we made this decision tonight, we do still have time to get it in a water bill insert on bright, colorful paper, just as described, that we can put that in there. We've got just enough time, I believe, to do that, to have it out for the June billing, correct? Yes, okay. We can do, and I think I highlighted this in my staff report too, we'll do CTYs, we'll put digital signage out in front of City Hall. We'll move our message board over there so everybody can see it. We'll put our hours of operation on the front doors of the building. We'll do anything and everything possible to let citizens know of the change that is coming.
Can you do the start date that would be easy for the payroll starting in the middle of the second
Look at
payroll?
you being so thoughtful. I love it. Okay, let me do that. So let me calculate that.
Well, it looks like they've been having issues with Paylocity. No.
Yes, those issues are fixed. We're okay.
So like starting on the week of June 10th, being the 14th, the first Friday off, does that affect payroll?
Let's see.
June 10th?
Yes, starting that week. It gives 1, 2, 3 weeks.
We didn't have any. No. Yeah, if they do, it's listed on there.
When does the payroll start for the second check?
So payrolls, it runs Wednesday to Wednesday. So the pay period begins, there's a pay period that begins on June the 5th, and there's a pay period that begins on June the 19th. I'm trying to think if there's is there anything, Susan, help me think this through, is there anything that would prohibit us from starting this on a Wednesday rather than a Monday? I don't think so. The employees are still going to get a benefit. They're working less hours, and it's not going to affect payroll. I think we could start it on a Wednesday.
They will have extra hours that they need to make up.
Right.
They will have 2 extra.
Not if we started at the start of a payroll, right? If we started at the beginning of a pay period on the 19th?
For the week, if they don't have 3 40 hours.
Oh. No, they would actually have overtime. They would actually have overtime because they would work the, oh, no. Okay. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't hear your question. On-call status, let me get to that.
Well, the on-call was $100.
So that is a new addition, and let me be clear here. We have not compensated employees for on-call status, and we absolutely need to compensate employees for on-call status. We cannot hold employees accountable if we are not compensating them to some level, and that becomes a big issue. So if the expectation is that, hey, you're going to answer your phone on these days that you're on call, we have to compensate those employees for that period of time. Otherwise, we cannot discipline them or hold them accountable for not meeting that standard that we set, if that makes sense.
Is that being on call on a Friday or being on call during the week?
So, well, it's actually both. Right now, currently, we don't have an on-call compensation.
Right.
We need to implement one really regardless of whether or not this resolution passes. We have to have an on-call. But they serve on-call for a week at a time. And Gilbert, when does that start? Does it start on a Monday?
Wednesday to Wednesday.
Okay, it matches payroll. So that's right, we did discuss that. So Wednesday to Wednesday, they're on, that one individual's on call for that whole week. That includes the weekend, that includes nights. If something happens at 4 o'clock in the morning, he's the one getting the call.
But that's for Public Works, or is that for every department?
That's for Public Works.
Oh, yeah,
Yep.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So is that a regular paycheck, or how are they paid? It's a monthly stipend. Oh, okay.
They will receive a monthly stipend for being on call at a rate of $100 per week.
Oh,
Got
okay.
it.
And it's not all of Public Works.
It's just the one person, yeah. Yes.
So the budget impact there would be $5,200.
And we're working on the budget now.
Yes. So it's really a minimal budget impact. But I think to answer your question regarding overtime, so the way that on-call works is that anytime an employee is called into work, they clock in the second they're called in if they have to go tend to an emergency, and they are paid at an overtime rate because it's traditionally hours that are in excess of their normally scheduled hours. Now, the Director of Public Works does have the ability to grant them the flexibility of, hey, you were out 8 hours all night last night. Do you want to flex some of that time off, in which they can take time off later in the week if it fits? Sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't, but he does try to flex some of that overtime off. But the overtime rate is time and a half.
Do they have trackers for their, in the vehicles?
We were just talking about that today. Currently, no, they do not. But we are looking at implementing something for those.
What's going to happen to the court?
So she is working with the judge and prosecutor. She's pretty flexible with her position, being an exempt employee. She is not opposed to keeping court on Fridays if she needs to and coming in and working specifically for court, and then just adjusting her hours later in the week, flexing where she needs to flex. The judge has unfortunately been out sick, so she hasn't had a chance to sit down and really take a deep dive into seeing if his schedule and our prosecutor's schedule can align on another day. But she's got no issues with keeping court on Fridays if she needs to. She will just make the necessary adjustments when court happens.
Okay, thank you.
The warrant officer, which is a part-time position, so we do have a part-time warrant officer that serves as our bailiff. This policy would not affect their operations at all. There wouldn't be a budget impact at all for them. Correct.
So when did we decide this could start? After we get it in the water bill on Monday? On a Monday? Right.
Well, I thought it was on Wednesday.
And Mindy or Susan, I'm going to ask you a question. I know, when does the water bill go out? 28th? So most residents should receive it the first week of June. Okay, so that's when you know that they'll have the inserts the first week of June.
So 1 week from today, the water bill is going to go out? Yes, ma'am. Okay, and we can get a colorful flyer inside the water bill? Okay. As long as we have that. Right. Okay. Good thing we're still working this Friday.
So to go back and answer the question about aligning it with payroll, I just don't think there's a way to do it without causing some sort of one-time making this transition. There's going to be an impact. But I do agree with Susan. I think we do need to start it on a Monday so they're not shorted the weekly hours.
The one-time thing, first shift.
It was June 10th.
Well, that's your decision. I'm okay with June 10th. So
Yeah.
we're okay with,
So then we need an amendment to the motion to set the date, right?
Amend? Do I just say that, or just say I amend?
Is it
You
am-
move to amend, you'll vote on the amendment, and then you'll vote on the main motion.
Okay.
With the stipend, how many employees would be on call?
only one employee per week. So it's going to cost us, the city, it would only cost us $100 a week. So total of $5,200 a year.
One per week, there's 3 individuals that are in rotation to receive that at this point.
Okay. Is that good, Johnny? Okay, just didn't want to rush. All right, I move to amend, the motion I just made for Resolution 2024-0506 to begin on June 10th, Monday. Is that good, Victoria?
Courtney.
Yes.
Pardon me,
Yes.
Courtney. Good question.
Who seconded? Okay, so motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Just poll the council.
Hello. Okay. Place 1,
Aye.
place 2. Place 3. Place 4,
Aye.
place 5,
Aye.
place 6. Mayor,
Aye.
motion carried.
And that was just for the motion,
That was for
amendment.
the amendment.
Okay, so now we're going to vote on the original motion to approve Resolution 2024-05-06. Would you poll the council?
Place 1, place 2, place 3, place 4,
Aye.
place 5,
Aye.
place 6. Mayor,
Aye.
motion carried.
Okay, next item, ordinance number 815, an ordinance of the City of Everman, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances by revising the water rates and providing for the following finding of facts, enactment, repealer, severability, publication, effective date, proper notice, and hearing. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve ordinance 815 as read.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
I do just want to clarify, so this was based off what I believed was the consensus from the last meeting. The attached schedule is a 5% increase on all water rates, on water base rates, a 0 increase on sewer rates. That does include the senior citizen rate, just so we're clear, which has an impact of 91 cents. Now, if council wishes to change that amount, we would need to amend the motion, but based off the feedback from the last meeting, that's what I've proposed in here.
So any further questions, comments? Poll the council.
Place 1, place 2, place 3, place 4,
Aye.
place 5,
Aye.
place 6. Mayor,
Aye.
motion carried.
Next item, ordinance number 816, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Everman, Texas, Chapter 4, Buildings and Building Regulations by adding a new Article 21, murals, providing for the repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing a severability clause, and providing a savings clause, and providing an effective date.
Before he entertains a motion, can I discuss this real quick? Or does? Okay. before a motion's discussed, just because I don't want you to have to amend your motion. On, on this ordinance, this was previously discussed at our prior meeting, a couple of changes. So on page 2 of 5 of the ordinance, the highlighted portion, 20%, we did do some surveying of some businesses in other cities. Staff recommendation would be to change that from 20 to 30%. We're okay with the 30% based off the feedback we've got. I've got no other proposed changes to the ordinance as it's written. We did include a portion in here, if you look underneath variance, section 21.06, it's on page 5 of 5 of the ordinance. There is an opportunity for anybody who does have a desire to go above and beyond what our ordinance already permits. We did identify a process in here for them to be able to do so through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So.
What was that under?
That is under section 21.06, a variance.
Page 5.
Yes, page 5 of 5 of the
Okay.
ordinance. Yep.
I was just
right
trying
here.
to get there.
Nope, you're good.
Page 17.
No, the murals will not have to, if this ordinance is approved and the proposed mural complies with the ordinance as it is written, then staff would approve it through our standard permitting process. If the mural proposed is outside of what the ordinance allows, then their avenue to get that approved would be through the Planning and Zoning Commission. If council wishes to have that come to them instead of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think you can do that. But Planning and Zoning Commission is typically more in line with kind of the standards of the city and what their expectations are based on your appointments for the neighborhoods. So felt that was a good fit.
So you said you were good with 30%.
That would be
Of the
staff
general
recommendation for 30%.
Okay.
Okay, but let's discuss the 30%. What does that mean, 30%?
So percentage of the mural that can contain advertisement for that business, or items that are advertisement for items that they sell at the business.
Okay, okay.
So
It could be a picture of a wagon train.
30% of it can be advertisement,
Okay,
70% of it can be art, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
gotcha. That makes sense.
So I'll entertain a motion.
And the motion will need to include the 30% if you wish to change that from the way it's written.
I move that we approve ordinance number 816 as read with the change to 30% of the mural definition. I'm making that up.
No, that was perfect, actually.
Second.
That is the mural definition.
Motion been made second. Any further discussion? Poll the council.
Place 1. Place 2. Place 3. Place 4.
Aye.
Place 5.
Aye.
Place 6. Mayor,
Aye.
motion carried.
Okay, so, let's,
Oh, come on up. Your timing couldn't have been any better.
we're going to reconvene. Okay, then city manager's report.
The only thing I've got is that just be prepared. We're probably going to be communicating pretty quickly by email regarding budget schedule. I may be reaching out to a couple of you. I want to make sure that we're amenable to your work schedules. Just trying to get things planned out and ready to go, but we are going to make budget as quick and painless of a process as we can. Keep in mind that this year is going to be a little difficult up until the point that we get our tax roll numbers back, because we have had a significant amount of development here that is almost impossible to predict. So, yeah. So it'll be an interesting year for budget, but stay tuned for that. Other than that, I don't. Oh well, no, we got time for that one. I'm good. That's all I got.
Okay, mayor's report. I just have two things, or actually three. The Binions, I went and visited them on their anniversary date, And they were very thankful and grateful for what we did for them, and said they wasn't deserving, but I assured them that, yes, you are.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people don't see 70 years of marriage, so, but had a very nice visit with them. And remember, next month is when we start the second and fourth Tuesdays, our meetings. And we're getting ready to do Craig's evaluation, so it's time, with the budget, it's time for us to do his evaluation, so.
So you're gonna send us something?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do that, and I'll give you paper copies too, since
Okay.
not everybody reads their emails, but.
It's around you, it's good
but-
around you.
But you'll be getting that very shortly, so we can plan that into the budget.
Okay.
But other than that, that's all I have, so we will adjourn the council meeting at 9:23, and we will reconvene into the Buildings and Standards Commission. So, how'd your conversation go with Mr. Childress?
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak with Mr. Childress. I think we do understand what the city's request is by way of, looking at what the building official has determined and their reports, and being able to provide the board with sufficient information on those points to be able to rebut it. We've discussed with Mr. Childress the necessary time frame it would take to perform that. And we recognize and understand the board needs to make a decision. I think, as Craig mentioned, we're all on the same page that this, the limbo should probably end, and we need to figure out what the plan is and what the determination is and what the future looks like and how we go about making our repairs. In order to meet the 45-day timeline that the city would like, or 42-day timeline, prior to the July 9th meeting, we would be able to meet that subject to being given the list of units that were inspected by Mr. Coker and Chief Watley. I believe Chief Watley mentioned that he has that information during the last meeting. We will then be able to take those units, do a deep dive into those units and those buildings by looking at the foundation, roofing, relative elevation survey of those units, the exterior of the buildings, and be able to provide a comprehensive plan and opinion about the entire property to the board by the July 9th meeting. We do need the list of units that were inspected by the city in order to do that, so we can mirror the path of the city to ensure that anything that was observed is properly studied, inspected, and investigated and reported back. And if we can get those units from the city, then we will be able to chart the same path and be able to provide the board with comprehensive information in 45 days.
Do you have that list that you can provide to them?
I can, and actually, I believe that it was on Mr. Coker's, he had his paper copy, and so
Okay.
I believe he notated them on there.
Okay, if we can work on that, and then one point of clarification, so we're sure, because we're happy to provide that information, but the plan that you're going to produce is comprehensive of the whole property, not just those specific apartments that we inspected, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So the inspection would be of the units that the city inspected and the same units that the building official made the determination on, but the repair plan and proposal will be property-wide.
I'm sorry, the repair plan will be what?
Property-wide.
Property-wide, thank you, I just didn't catch it.
And is that going to satisfy all the requirements of the chapter? I mean, that'll meet the needs.
It should, because what the chapter requires is that if this board were to determine that the buildings were substandard, then to allow the property owner time to repair, there has to be a full scope of work, timeline, and financial feasibility on all the buildings on the property. So I think what they're saying is they're going to trace the steps to do their comprehensive evaluation. Did I understand that?
That's right, and I do want to be clear, it won't be what 929 was, which is inside and out of every single unit in that building. It will be tracing the steps and the inspections of the units that the city performed in order to make its determination. However, that inspection with the type of data and studies that Childress will be doing will allow us to get information on what is generally a property-wide repair scope and proposed timeline. The good news is we're already moving on the asbestos side of it, so that part can kind of be built into whatever plan Childress is developing for the studies of the other units. But yes, that's what we're proposing.
But that doesn't sound to me like you're going back and you're going through everything, though.
Yeah, you're just
So,
doing that
so
929.
I think, just to clarify, I understand, he's saying that they're going to essentially trace the city's footsteps on what it was that we inspected. They will develop a comprehensive plan to address all of the issues, remediate all the issues, but in order to meet that timeline, to go through each one of the apartments one by one, to determine every single RES, every single structural issue, that's going to be hard to determine. I don't think that's necessarily unfair and unequal, considering the determination was based on the same number of inspections. I think they're doing like for like, and I don't think that's unfair to ask, and I think that probably would be beneficial to get us to a point to make a decision, because we're already making a decision based on the same number of apartments they're going to be supplying information for, if that makes sense. But your plan is to address all of the apartments, property-wide?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes,
yep.
exactly as you
Perfect.
phrased it.
Okay.
My just question / concern is quite a bit of the findings were of an exterior, the 360 of all the structures. So it still goes back to, you may not have to enter every single apartment, but the generalized report notates all of the deficiencies that are on the exterior. So there's not going to be a specific, at the corner of the AB corner of this building, this is where this electrical issues were found. It's just going to cite that entire. So we're still looking at the scope of the entirety of the building. So we can't just go by one apartment and mitigate those problems, because especially with the number of deficiencies that were found that were on the exterior, it is all inclusive of the entire building. So that's where I'm not really following on how we could follow the city's footsteps, because when we did a lot of the assessment from the exterior and we found the structural and the electrical issues, they're
Sure,
all
so
over.
I think they're still going to do an exterior inspection. I think they're going to inspect everything that we inspect to gather the information that they need to compile the comprehensive plan that's required. So my understanding is they're going to present the comprehensive plan that we're requiring that addresses all of the issues, but in order for them to develop that comprehensive plan in 45 days, they're going to essentially trace the city's footsteps to try to see what we saw to develop that plan. Otherwise, what they're doing is they're developing what sounds like may wind up being the same comprehensive plan after going through and inspecting each and every one of the departments. I don't think, and I haven't heard them, they're not disagreeing with the fact that these are systemic and likely building-wide. They're just going to use that data off those apartments to build their system-wide systemic plan to address it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I just don't understand how they would be able to singularly do the relative elevation study on one we selected 2 different apartments per building. How would we be able to?
I think that's going to be their burden and not ours.
Okay. All right.
If that makes sense. To put that bluntly and fair, is that fair to say?
You phrased everything perfectly.
Okay.
Okay, so
So
any
we're
other
gonna-
questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're good on numbers. We're going to give them 42 days, and, yes.
July 2nd.
So July 2nd, July 2nd is a Tuesday. So by July 2nd, we'll have all of the data, reports, and then we'll meet on July 9th to meet again. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
And the only thing I would like to add is it may push to that 45-day, and the only dependent on that is, I'm assuming we can get the unit numbers fairly quickly, but if there's any turnaround time allocated for getting the units to us so then we can figure out who to mobilize and where via Childress, that's the only rub of time that may push it a few days. But yes, our goal is to try to get it by July 2nd, at the latest July 5th. But as soon as we get the units from the city, we'll be able to mobilize and start going. Perfect.
We're going to have to, it's going to be a pretty hard deadline. I mean, if this board's going to move to make a motion with a deadline, those items are going to have to be submitted by that deadline,
I
so.
would very
if
respectfully request July 5th, if it's at all possible.
You respectfully request what?
July 5th to be the deadline for submission of the materials then, please.
That's going to be a Friday that council.
We can receive it and distribute it on Friday.
Okay, okay.
We
I just
we
wanna
will,
make
we
sure.
will make sure to accommodate that for this. Yes, yes, yeah. I get paid regardless, so I'm
And
okay.
To be clear, our intention, like for 929, where every unit was inspected and all, we will provide stuff via Mr. Spencer and the city attorney on a rolling basis as we receive that information, certainly. But I do understand the comprehensive report and plan that is being requested, and that's the one that, July 5th, if the board would accommodate that request.
That's the,
I would just like to mention that the reason why we moved to the second was because, based upon the engineer.
Susan, budget scheduling, as we're looking for dates for budget, if we were to call a special meeting specifically for the Building and Standards Commission rather than a joint meeting, is that going to hinder our budget planning process? As the joint Building and Standards? So what I was going to say is we are already through the later part of June and into July, we are likely already going to be meeting weekly. So one option would be is if the board wanted to give a week for the engineer to review and wanted to give them to July the 5th, we could schedule the hearing for July the 16th, which
I'm okay with that.
is the third.
Yes. We're going to be meeting anyway.
Budget meetings last
We won't do expenditures that night. We'll do anything else but expenditures that night.
Okay.
But that is an option that you could consider, considering we're already likely going to be meeting weekly around that time period. Okay.
Okay.
That is, if that's what you choose, but that is possible, yes.
I do not have to be here. Victoria will be here, but I will be, I've got a prayer on the 16th.
Unacceptable.
Okay, so turn the paperwork. We're looking at them turning their paperwork in on the 5th, and then we meet on the 16th. Am I up? Okay.
Okay. That is correct. Okay.
Duh, that's why we're moving it. Okay.
I bet Andrew can review it in a weekend if you wanted to keep it on the 5th and the 9th. We'll just have to cram it in. We'll just need to cram
Where's
it in.
Andrew? Yes, he's doing it.
We'll cram
Okay,
it.
so we're leaving it on the 9th. This is why we discuss things. I should have been doing this in pencil. 5 and 9.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
With that being said, I will entertain a motion.
I move to defer a decision on case number 1394 for 42 days. I think that number's still the same. Oh, back that up.
And I would state the specific
I got a question.
The dates.
Yes. Okay, let me start that again. I move to defer a decision on case number 1394 and place this matter for consideration on the Building Standards Commission agenda for July 9th, okay, at which time the owner shall provide reports, surveys or studies for all buildings at the Paradise Apartment Complex, including, but not limited to, structural issues, roof concerns,
electrical hazards, mechanical hazards, plumbing concerns, and any and all other code violations that constitute substandard and dangerous conditions, and owner shall also provide a detailed scope of work, time schedule for the work to bring all buildings into compliance, and provide detailed financial information, including a budget and source of financing for required repairs, which will be delivered to the city staff by Friday, July 5th.
Oh, okay. Okay, motion been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
You want to read all that again? So,
I'm good. I'm good.
okay, motion been made and second. Any further discussion? Would you poll the board?
Place one.
Oh, no, Larry, raise your hand.
All in favor?
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, with that being said, the time is 9:38 and we are adjourned.
God, it gets so confusing, council.